Okay, I'm calling to order this special meeting of council. First, I'd like to acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the traditional unceded territory of the Stanawas First Nation. And first item on our agenda is adoption of the agenda. I'll make the motion that the November 23rd, 2022 special council meeting agenda be adopted as presented. Is there a seconder? Second by Councillor Lerner. Any discussion on the agenda? Oh, sorry, we did have green sheets, additional information, and I left mine at home. Oops. Well, I just need to make reference to them. So we did have additional information for item 4A. And that was to do with the questions, and then we also had some public input as well regarding item 4A. So it's with additional information received for 4A. Is there anything further? Okay, so I'll just simply call the question on the agenda with additional information received for item 4A. So all those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. Actually, you can have those back if you'd like.
Sure.
Yes. Okay, so at this point, we'll move on in the agenda to item 3, which is public input period. So person or persons recognized by the chair must first state their name and address for the record and may speak once for up to 2 minutes unless council resolves otherwise, or are limited to providing comment regarding the items listed on this evening's agenda. Comments must be directed to the chair and must not be directed to individual members of council, staff, or the audience, and must not include personnel issues. So I don't think we have any remotely registered, no remotely registered people for public or input. Anybody in the gallery? We have one member in the gallery this evening. Okay. Oh, we have another one entering. It's public input period. If you have any public input, going once. For public input twice. Okay, that's gone. Now we're on to item 4A of our agenda. So again, we did have some additional information received. So we had some questions from council as well as one piece of correspondence. At this point, we will pass this over to Director Hare to introduce the draft 2023 to 2027 financial plan. So Director Hare, I believe the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Your Worship. Your Worship.
Oh, sorry, okay. We can see your screen just fine as well, just so you know.
Okay. And I've got the right presentation up this time. So thank you, Your Worship. Your Worship, through you to council and the public, this PowerPoint presentation is intended to summarize the information that was provided to council on November 10th in the budget binders with respect to the 2023 to 2027 financial plan on the operating and capital budgets. The long-term pressures facing the municipality were also addressed in a report to council dated November 9th and summarized in a November 14th PowerPoint presentation to council. You'll recall that there were illustrations and information provided to help council understand the long-term budgeting pressures facing the municipality. The ones that were focused on were the annual infrastructure funding gap or deficit of $433,000 regarding life cycle renewal and replacement of district assets. There's also information provided on policing costs and when they become the responsibility of the municipality. And there was information on non-market change. I'm going to ask council members to save their questions on the presentation to the end of the presentation so that I can get through. I've got quite a few slides, and then I can come back to any slides that are of interest when I'm addressing any questions you may have. So in this PowerPoint presentation, I'm going to review the budget highlights, the 2023 budget highlights of the general fund and operating budgets. I'm going to talk about the impacts of the changes required to water and sewer user fees as a result of budget changes. I'm going to recap the annual fee for the garbage collection and recycling, and I will illustrate the impact to the average assessed property of the additional property tax required in 2023 for the proposed budget. I will also go through basically quick overview of the operating projects plan for 2023 and the capital plan for the next 5 years, and then recap next steps in the budget process. So cost pressures for 2023 are attributable to inflation or increase in costs for acquiring goods and services. Also for resources that are required to maintain providing current levels of service to residents. And lastly, for funding to reserves. So there's insufficient funding in reserves, as I mentioned earlier, to address the life cycle maintenance costs of assets. And that was discussed in some detail. And as I mentioned, slides were provided at the previous council meeting to identify that infrastructure funding deficit. And also there is a provision included in the funding to reserves for to address policing costs when they will become the responsibility of the municipality in the future. So inflation-based costs, essentially our wages and benefits area is influenced by it. There's inflation costs, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about them in a subsequent slide, but bylaw services is impacted by inflation increases, as is janitorial services, maintenance and supplies and services costs, and insurance. In terms of maintaining levels of service, there are some provisions for additional human resources included in the 2023 budget. There is also an increase in bylaw services hours. And we also need to make whole our budgeting provision for software licensing fees. And there's also some costs for a fireworks display that the basically fire hall puts on annually at Halloween for the municipality. And then in the area of funding deficits and future planning, there are the asset management reserves where contributions are insufficient for life cycle maintenance, as I had mentioned. We are also required to make a contribution to the Parkland Capital Infrastructure Reserve by bylaw, which is equivalent to 10% of non-market change revenue. And the budget also includes a provision for future policing costs. So in terms of getting into the actual dollars involved, the financial impacts of the inflationary cost pressures are illustrated in this slide. So wages for exempt staff and council remuneration are based on the CPI index for Victoria. So the wages for and the wages for union staff are based on the collective agreement. Benefit costs are dictated by the benefit providers. So there's been no change in the level of benefits. It's just the increase in premiums. And so an additional budget provision of $145,600 is required to address the difference between the contractual obligations of the 2023 annual cost for council compensation, exempt staff and union staff, and benefit costs. The inflationary impact on supplies and services and maintenance is $23,700 for 2023. And an additional $19,200 is required for the anticipated insurance costs for 2023. And roughly half of this cost is due to a new insurance that a new coverage we took out last year, which is for cyber risk coverage, which MIA is recommending for all municipalities. And half of it is due to increase in premium costs. The provision for bylaw services has also been broken out into two components. So the inflationary impact of the provision for bylaw services is $9,800. The municipality started to provide contracted bylaw services in 2020 at basically 21 hours a week, and there was no increase. There was no provisions in that contract. That contract expired, I believe, in September of this year. So there is somewhat of a catch-up provision for inflation for the years that cost had remained stable in 2020, 21, and 22. And in terms of maintaining levels of service, additional human resources costs of $85,600 are included in the budget, and that's comprised of actually a part-time seasonal worker, and then our volunteer firefighters. Last year, council approved a minimum compensation of 2-hour call-out for paid on-call volunteers, and so the costs of compensation for that provision exceed the budget provision, so an additional budget provision is required. Essentially, we have a much stronger turnout to emergency calls than what we had in the past, and we hadn't anticipated the increase in number of volunteers responding to calls. And we also, our fire chief currently works 4 days a week, and to meet the demands and legislative requirements of his job, an additional day. So the position is moving from a 0.8 FTE to a full-time FTE. So from essentially 4 days a week to 5 days a week. The bylaw services component is also being increased. Currently, as I mentioned earlier, we basically contract out for 21 hours a month for bylaw services, and based on the increased inquiries and demand for responses required, an additional time is required. So the budget provides for an increase of 7 hours per week to 28 hours per week of bylaw services time. And our janitorial services cost increases. Essentially, the tax-funded portion of the total increase in the janitorial services cost is about $28,000 a year. And we're able to fund 21,000 of that through non-taxation sources of revenue. So the remainder of 7,100 is being funded through taxes. And basically, the janitorial services, it represents COVID cleaning protocols. So there's about 2 hours. It's based on about 2 hours of janitorial services a day to ensure safety of staff and the public coming into municipal hall, and it involves the wiping of all touchable surfaces and adequate cleaning to ensure everybody's safety. The fire hall also puts on an annual display of fireworks at Halloween, and we don't have a budget provision for that. We always scramble to look for funding every year for that. So we're actually looking to put that budget provision into the budget so that those are funded on an annual basis. And in terms of maintaining levels of service, I guess these are the non-taxation funded portions of the increases. I'd spoken to the janitorial services increase earlier, and our budget provision for software licensing fees is not sufficient to meet the actual costs of software licensing fees. So we need an additional 24,300 in the budget provision for software licensing fees so that the budget covers off the expected cost. In terms of our, next slide here. So in terms of our funding deficits and contributions to reserves, I spoke to this quite some length earlier. So our contribution to asset management reserves, a strategy is required to address the infrastructure funding deficit to take care of the life cycle needs of our assets. So essentially on an annual basis, we are $433,000 short in our contribution to reserves to address life cycle needs. And I've based the contribution to asset reserves on putting 1% of tax rate increase, or increasing the contribution to asset reserves by the equivalent of a 1% tax increase. So 30,700 going to contribution to asset reserves. And the 2023 budget also establishes an initial increase in a contribution for policing services. So what the idea behind this is every year we will increase the contribution by $30,000 and build up the funding amount to an amount that will be required when policing costs become the responsibility of the municipality. And what that will do is ensure that there is funding in place to address policing costs when they become the responsibility of the municipality. We are also required to contribute, as I mentioned earlier, 10% of new construction revenue to a parkland capital infrastructure reserve. It's written into the bylaw. So currently we have put in a provision of $46,000 for new construction revenue. And so we've dedicated a 10% of that is $4,600 contribution. So if new construction revenue actually happens to be higher than that, then we will be contributing more to that reserve based on that percentage. And so to recap, essentially, sorry, I'm just going to bring this whole slide up rather than go piece by piece. So to recap what I was just talking about,
Sorry,
inflation.
just as a point of privilege, it's been requested. Is there any way of turning your mic volume down? Because it's coming through the chambers really loud.
Really loud?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we might be able to adjust it within the chamber. Deputy Director Richardson is doing that right now. Maybe we'll do a little test. Okay, maybe continue on, Director Hare, and we can tell you if it's too loud or not loud at all, or enough. Now we have no sound.
Sorry, that no sound was fault of mine. I actually unmuted myself or muted myself. My apologies. Is that better?
I don't know.
Or is it still too loud?
Couple head shakes.
Well, I'll keep talking. Just interrupt me if it's too loud, and then I can speak a little softer, a little bit more quietly.
Okay.
If the volume doesn't adjust itself. So to recap the cost pressures that I was talking about, inflation-based cost increases total $198,300, and those cost increases that were related to maintaining levels of services amounted to $164,600. And then we are proposing an additional $65,300 as funding to reserves for total expenditure increases of $428,200. 80,000 of that 428,200 can be funded through additional revenues that we've brought into the budget, and then the required funding of 348,200 would be funded through an increase in property taxes. So this slide here, so what does all of that mean? A $348,000 increase in property taxes. Well, based on the 2022 assessment information, the average value of an assessed home, or the average assessed value of a home in Lantzville, was $1,033,000. And an increase of $348,200 in property taxes would imply an annual increase of $179 or $15 a month to that particular home. So your annual municipal taxes would be $1,758 a year, or $147 a month. Because property taxes are based on assessed value, they will vary based on assessed value. So I've provided basically a range of assessed values and what the impact would look like, so people can very easily put themselves into one of these categories and see what the impact would be. So if your home was assessed at $700,000, the annual increase would be $121, whereas if your home was assessed at closer to 1.5 million, it would imply an increase of $260 a year in your municipal property taxes. Now, on the utility side, essentially no increase is expected in user fees for the sewer utility in 2023. There will be some additional revenue coming in from newly connected properties, which will cover the cost of anticipated increases in expenditures. And it will also allow for an increase to the contribution to the reserve for capital. So the quarterly charge for sewer is $128 per quarter, and it will remain at that level for 2023. In the water utility, a 6% increase is required in water rates to address the increase in expected in expenditures. And it's primarily driven by the anticipated increase in bulk water purchases from Nanaimo, and will also allow for an increase in the contribution to reserves there. The quarterly base rate will increase from $80 for 2022 to $85 in 2023. And in terms of garbage collection fees, the automated collection for garbage began on October 1st, 2020. And the district provides curbside pickup for garbage, recycling, and food waste through a contract with the regional district of Nanaimo. The annual charge is expected to increase from about $5 to $165 for a 100-liter cart, which is the typical size of a cart for residents in Lantzville. It's billed out quarterly, and the increase in cost is expected to be driven by an increase in tipping fees. So essentially, we have three sizes of carts, and so again, the majority of carts are in the 100-liter carts rather. And so we would expect, I mean, if you've got a, I can't remember the exact sizes now, but if you have a 125-liter cart, your cost would probably still go up by about $5. So what is all of, so when you combine the property tax increase with the increases in water, sewer, and garbage, municipal property, again, we base this on the average value home in Lantzville. The municipal property taxes will go up by $179. Water charges will go up by $19 a year, and garbage will go up by $5 for an increase of $203, which is just under 8%. So you're looking at an overall increase in municipal services costs of just under 8% for all of these services combined. And now I'm going to jump over to the one-time operating projects that are planned for 2023. And these do not impact, I just want to be clear, these do not impact the property tax rate. These are either funded from, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of history. So last year was the first year that council approved an annual contribution of $50,000 to a reserve for operating projects. The municipality had no funding source for one-time operating projects. And so last year we contributed $50,000 to that reserve, and we did not use any of the money out of that reserve. In 2023, we will contribute another $50,000. So there will be $100,000 in that reserve that will be available to fund one-time projects. And that reserve was established and meant to fund smaller projects like the mapping of the eagle and heron nests and smaller concept plans. It was not meant to fund really large projects like a Parks master plan or a development cost charges review. So we are able to fund most of these projects through that reserve. And in addition, we have basically some grant funding. So I'm just going to quickly walk through. The budget book actually identifies all of the one-time projects with where they are funded from. But essentially, one-time projects that we have included in the financial plan for 2023 include a road network and traffic master plan, a parks master plan, a development cost charges review, a concept plan for Village West, special planned area, a map, eagle, and heron nest. We have included a provision for an asset management for further development of our asset management system. And that's based on award of a grant application that's been put in for funding that was available. So that will only proceed if we are approved for the grant, and it is anticipated to be 100% grant funded. We've applied for about $168,000 of grant funding. We also have a provision in the budget for a council and staff compensation review, which basically is, I believe, done every fourth year. So it's been a few years since one was done. And we have also a provision for emergency preparedness response plan and emergency operations kit. And both of those projects in the emergency area will only proceed if we receive 100% grant funding. So there is no municipal contribution to those projects required either. So this slide here just gives you an overview of the extent of capital spending over the next 5 years. So basically I've broken it's broken into categories. So facilities, heavy duty equipment, transportation infrastructure, equipment and information technology, and then water fund projects and the sewer fund projects. And I will get into a little bit more detail about the 2023 projects in a subsequent slide. However, the takeaway from this slide is that capital spending varies from year to year, and it's more accurate the closer basically in time the project is. So 2023 and 2024 planned projects are probably more reflective than the outer years of 2025 to 2027, but nonetheless our capital expenditure requirements based on the plan range from about just over $19 million to $784,000 a year. And significant capital projects planned in 2023 are comprised of the fire hall replacement, the Dickinson Road replacement. There's a Lantzville multi-use path. I haven't taken that out of here yet. This was a project that had $900,000 of senior level grant funding and $155,000 being contributed from DCCs and 200 from a reserve. So actually 900 of 1,250,000 was coming from senior levels of government. However, that will be removed from the capital plan because staff was instructed to basically withdraw their grant application for this project. In addition to that, we've got
information. I'm a little confused on that one. I believe the multipurpose pathway was only going to see $500,000 of grant funding, and then their balance was going to be funded out of
it was
tax,
gas tax is a senior level grant fund. That's not municipal funding.
Okay, I was just curious about the totals.
Okay, yeah, it was actually 500,000 from, I believe, was it one of the I can't remember whether it was transit, but it was through one of the government agencies, and then 400,000 through gas tax funds. So those gas tax funds will be available. They will still be available to fund other projects, but I was just saying that it was funded basically 900, almost 3/4 from senior levels of government.
Okay, I understand. Yeah,
okay.
Doing that. So, sorry, we did have one other question. I know you're waiting to the end.
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify that because we had a few looks of being a bit puzzled. Anyways, Councillor Lerner.
Yeah, just to make sure I understand before we move on, the 900,000, it's 500,000 from a grant we were waiting that the application has now been withdrawn. The other 400,000 was a gas tax grant that we had already been received and can now use for other things. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So, okay. So we also, so in 2023, we're looking at the Ware Road culvert replacement. The Winds water system expansion is dependent on approval of a grant application that we have in. We expect to hear back in the spring on that, I believe. And then we have water main replacements and a sewer station pump replacement on Lavender Road in our 2023 capital plan. In terms of just a high-level summary of the projects, significant projects in outer years, we've got phase 2 of the Dickinson Road replacement, asphalt replacements on several streets within the district, culvert replacements on Lantzville Road and Alger Road, water system expansion in the Clark Drive area when and if future grant funding becomes available, because it'll be a significant cost project, and water main replacements in each of the outer years as well, as part of the regular maintenance of the water system. So that concludes the budget information. And so the next slide here is a staff recommendation. The staff recommendation is that council directs staff to proceed to public consultation on November 28th with the proposed 2023 to 2027 financial plan, and that staff prepare a financial plan bylaw for council consideration at the November 28th special council meeting based on the budget information that's been presented.
Okay, thank you for your
And-
presentation. Through to council.
And then, okay. Yeah, that's fine. I just had one quick information. I just wanted to highlight that basically all of the budget information that's been presented to council has been focused on council being able to provide staff with direction at a policy level and to be able to approve and make decisions at a policy-based level. And so just wanted to kind of highlight that that's what all of the information provided to council has been based on. Thank you. And any questions, please, I'm happy to answer any questions as at this point.
Okay, again, thank you for your presentation. Yeah, I'll open it up to council for questions. So Councilor Lerner, go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I have questions, I guess, and a motion, but I'll start with questions and we can do the motion when the chair advises that it's a good time for that. Thank you so much for the presentation. I do have a number of questions, so maybe I'll just go one at a time. The pages 4 of 29 and 5 of 29 and 6 of 29 on section 1 of the financial plan binder. I'm just looking at that and had some questions in there. The bylaw services, you noted it's an increase of $31,300 for an extra 7 hours per week. And that includes an inflationary provision of $9,800. So I did doing the math at 2 hours per week, 52 weeks a year. That's 364 hours. So that works out to almost $86 an hour. So I just want to understand, is that correct, $86 an hour? And also, you mentioned the inflationary amount, $9,800 for catching up from 2020, 2021, 2022. But if the original contract did not have increases included for inflation, why would we retroactively pay that? Thank you.
With respect to the calculation that you asked about, if you can send that to me in an email, I can do that. I basically can't do that math in my head right on the spot here. So if you can send me those numbers, I'd be happy to look at them. But with respect to the larger principle, I'm going to defer to Director Limshu, as he was the lead in negotiating that contract. So he'll be able to answer that question for you.
Your worship, through the council, can everybody hear me?
Yeah, I think so. Well, it may need to be turned up. I don't know. It's coming through a little quietly.
Okay, how's that?
That's better. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so I think a couple things there. With respect to the budget items for bylaw services in the binder, and I believe this is a question that was asked earlier. On page 18, you'll see that it outlines the actuals versus the budget, 22 versus 23. I just want to highlight that the number includes not just bylaw enforcement, but the numbers also for animal control. So to answer Councillor Lerner's question, the per hour rate is not $89 an hour. It's less than that. In reviewing the contract with the bylaw enforcement officer, yeah, as indicated, there was no provision for any sort of increases over the term of the contract. There's a bit of back and forth between ourselves and the contractor, given increasing costs for her with respect to fuel, insurance, and insurance for her was sort of a big one. We negotiated a new number, hourly rate, for her. and that's the number that's been used to calculate the new contract figure. With respect to the extra 7 hours, this is just based on workload. So what we've seen um, over the course of the last 2 years, when you look at uh, the number of complaints that we receive and our response time with respect to addressing those complaints. And I should mention that the complaints vary from requiring the officer or staff to make a simple phone call to situations where we're actually preparing to take individuals to court, and so that does take up some time. Um, it was felt that um, in order to provide, a reasonable turnaround time with respect to addressing the various complaints that were received, um, it merit looking at increasing the weekly hourly number from 21 hours per week to 28 hours per week.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that information. That a similar question then on page 5 and 6 each include janitorial costs when added together equals $28,200. And it was mentioned in the presentation tonight that it saw an increase of 2 hours per day. Even if it was at 365 days a year, that would be $39 an hour. And if it was less than that because of weekends or holidays, could be as high as $65 an hour. So I'm just wondering how the negotiations were reached to increase janitorial services by $28,200 in 1 year. And I understand that there is sanitization due to COVID, but it sounds like that sanitization has been in place funded through the COVID Restart Grant. Is that correct?
That is correct. So this contract is not awarded to the people who were doing the contracting previously. The contract for cleaning services went out to RFP. And so it was awarded to, I believe, the lowest bidder and somebody who was able to provide the services, and the level of cleaning service was based on COVID protocol and ensuring safety. So sorry, what you may have misinterpreted what I said. I believe the contract, and Trudy, you can correct me, it's based on 2 hours of cleaning a day. So it's not based on a 2 hour increase. I believe every day they do 2 hours of cleaning across the municipal facilities. And the budget provision for cleaning services was very low in the past. It was not reflective of cleaning standards for the organization.
Okay, thank you. I did have a couple quick more questions. Page 6, it includes things that for the enterprise resource planning software. I'm under the impression we've been using the software since I think 2014 or 2016. So I'm wondering where the license for that was paid before in the budget. And similarly with the fireworks funding has been going on for a number of years. I noticed our grants and aid increased substantially. Previously, I think it went from 7,000 to 14,000 or something like that. Now it's increasing again. So it's basically tripling over time. And went from 7,000 to 14,000. Now there's another 5,000. I'm just wondering where that was funded before and where the remaining grants and aid are going if it's tripling over the course of 2 years.
So to answer your question on the, sorry, what page were you looking at for the, sorry, you were
the enterprise software is on.
Okay.
The enterprise software is page 6. Yeah.
So the software licensing, I believe, it's the software licensing increase in cost. We separated out our IT support costs and our software licensing costs, and essentially we have taken on additional modules over time, is my understanding. However, we never increased the budget provision for them. So the actual costs have been running over the budgeted cost in the past. We did an analysis last year of our software licensing costs and our IT support costs. And we found that the budget provision was inadequate in comparison to the actual licensing costs. We've also had to take on some additional licenses for things like, small things, which like Adobe, for instance, as staffing changes, people require licenses to have the tools available to do their jobs. So we basically, Microsoft, all software models actually have changed over time and are basing themselves more on the licensing fee model than outright purchase of the software. And I just don't believe that the budget provisions were adjusted to reflect those changes in costing models for the various pieces of software that we own.
Okay, thank you. I'll hold my other questions until others have a chance to ask.
Yeah, Director Coates?
I just wanted to clarify or get clarity on what the reference was to the grants and aid, because I believe the grants and aid amount is 2,500 per year. But
Oh,
there was
sure,
a
sorry.
reference to 14,000.
I can just find that in here on the page. I will just locate that. That was on page 20 of 29 of section 1 of the finance binder under I'm looking at the grants and aid. Yes, it went from $7,016 in 2021 actual to a budget of $14,500 in 2022, which is a doubling, to now an additional $5,000 for fireworks to a budget of $19,500. So it grew over 2 years from $7,000 to $19,500, which is just under triple. So I'm curious as to where the fireworks provision has come out before and what the grants and aid are for that have tripled.
Councillor Lerner, what page are you looking at? Because I can answer your part of your question, but I'm not sure what you're referring to. I mean, you mentioned a whole bunch of numbers.
Page 20 of 29 of the financial plan, page 20 of 29 under parks and culture, grants and aid.
Grants and aid. Okay, so the budget, okay, so So essentially, when we're looking at, you were talking about the actuals of $7,000. So if grants and aid were $7,000 in 2021, essentially we basically had a budget in 2000. I believe our budget was about 14.5 because it hasn't increased over time. So we had awarded less grants than what we had in the budget. So we were able to fund the fireworks with the grant funds that hadn't been issued to other organizations. So with the $5,000 increase, we have rolled it up into the grants and aid. And however, essentially we're looking to leave the grants and aid budget at the level it was at and increase and provide an assured funding source for the fireworks display. So it would not be part of the available grant budget when people are applying for grants and aid.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm a little confused on this one, but I think I'll take a quick stab at it. I believe their grant and aid program is $2,500 annually. And then I'm assuming, and I hate to make assumptions here, but would the Minetown Day money be coming out of this line item as well?
Yes, so the grant and aid that we advertise on behalf of council for council to consider awarding, and it gets advertised in January, and then a report will come to council in February. The budget for that and the actual, in 2021, it was higher because council determined there was some other things they wanted to give grants to, so it was 4,500. And for 2022, the actual forecast is 2,500, and that was the budget for 2022, and 2,500 is the budget for 2023. So that's the one that we usually term grant and aid, but then you're right, we have the other things that get rolled up, and those come from other, like you say,
So, Your Worship, I can provide you clarification of what's comprised in that number. I can't remember off the top of my head what's rolling into that number, but it's very easily verifiable. So I will get back to you on that, perhaps to all of council via email tomorrow.
Yeah, because it is confusing. It's, because even if we looked at the 2022 number, it should be 12,500 if I'm not mistaken, because then I would include the 2,500 for the grant and aid program, and then it would be the $10,000 for Minetown Day that's basically given to Seaside Society to manage through the Minetown Day Committee. So
Yeah, I'll remove
But
that confusion. I'll
sorry?
provide clarification. I'll
Plus the
provide
fireworks is-
clarification on that. I can actually do that pretty. well.
okay, sure. We'll just wait
Yeah.
for the. Yeah, that's probably the best thing is if you can break it down.
Yeah, I'll break that out for you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Additional questions through the council? Councillor Jones.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a question, page 25 of 29, section 1, please, regarding the Ware Road culvert replacement. If I could just have a little bit of background information, if you don't mind, just to make sure that I have correct information residing in my brain. Is it the case that Ware Road was built by Lantzville Projects?
I'm going to defer that question to Director Spears.
Through your worship to council, I'm not sure, but I believe the history says that the original Ware Road portion up at the top end was built by Lantzville Projects. However, with this project, it has nothing to do with Lantzville Projects. It's basically what is happening is the existing culvert is rotted out at the bottom, and you can actually tell when you drive over it that there's a bump in the road now. So what we want to do is we want to actually remove the old culvert and just place a new one back in that place.
Thank you for that. I understand that and have looked at the road, and there's a little patch there for sure. And if you say the culvert is eroding or damaged, I certainly respect that. But the function of the culvert is to take the water from the ditch that from the church there to once it reaches Ware Road, to take it under Ware Road. Would it not be the case that this is a culvert which is serves a purpose for the property owner, Lantzville Projects, and therefore it might be for them to cover the cost of replacement?
Through your worship to council, I guess that could be said of a lot of different properties in Lantzville. However, when looking at the bigger picture, the water's coming off the highway, coming down through towards Wiles Road that way, and basically coming through that property, entering our road allowance and going under the road. It would be the same, I guess, as when we replace the culvert that goes under Lantzville Road. It's the same type of concept. Water also goes from the end of Harvey Road East and traverses down through the property and comes out at the Lantzville Road culvert. This culvert exchange would be no different than any other ones within the district's road right-of-ways.
Thank you. So I gather cost sharing isn't something that would be considered in such a situation, given that there's both water from the private property as well as water from district property? Sorry, just a question.
Yeah, through your worship, I think if we were looking at getting cost sharing through that type of project, we would have to open that up to the whole district and other areas as well when we're changing out culverts. So if that's a council policy that they want to make, council can actually do that, and then staff will try and carry out that policy. So.
Thank you for the clarification, Director Spears.
I was just going to comment on that briefly. I think the thing we have to recognize is it is a community-owned asset, and it's below a community-owned asset, the road. So I believe we, it's just the the burden of replacing it lies with the municipality, which is funded through the municipality, or through the taxpayers, so. You know, we'd have to almost get into a local area service kind of situation, if we're trying to do that throughout the municipality and pass on the cost directly to the people that, you know, or to the, whatever's getting replaced, so it'd be a really tricky animal, so to, to work on, because I'm looking, you know, even in my neighborhood, you know, eventually Dickinson Road's going to get replaced, there's gonna be sidewalks getting installed down there now, you know, in some places, they would view the sidewalk as being an improvement, and that would be benefiting that immediate neighborhood, and the costs of putting a sidewalk in would be allocated towards, or to those property owners. Whereas in Lantzville, we don't do that. It's when the new road goes in and the sidewalk goes in all the way Dickinson eventually, the cost or the burden of that is to the municipality, to all taxpayers. So it depends on what direction the council wants to go with the municipality and allocating costs of infrastructure projects, but I think we're stronger together than we are apart, so in getting improvements done. Director Mundell.
I got promoted.
Yeah, Director, sorry, Councillor Mundell.
Thank you.
That's the RDN.
Yeah, fair enough. Just a question regarding the culvert and the drainage. Is it something that needs to happen in 2023? Or is this something that could be combined with potentially future development in that area? Just noting that probably there's going to be a lot of infrastructure changes as that area potentially gets developed, that could this be in combination with that work?
Through your worship to the chair, by putting it off, it's actually, we're putting the road at risk the longer we let it go, with knowing that it's an issue. If there was a failure, then we would be considered negligent in our duties to provide a safe roadway. So I have put it off about 2 years. It was not on the projects list because of the application that was before council. So we were waiting to see where that went, but that application failed, and now we're looking at having to step up and replace it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just curious about that because I believe the Alger Road culvert was on the project list for a couple of years now, and that one's been, I see, pushed to 2027 now. So I was just curious if this one also could be pushed out a little longer. Thank you.
Through the chair, I guess one of the things that we, I guess I can maybe enlighten a little bit on is that most of our replacement plans are living documents. So as things come up, we go out and inspect and see at what level damage or wear and tear on certain things like roads and culverts and whatnot. And then we categorize them as important, more important, and then it could be a catastrophe if we don't do something about it right away. So those are the things that you'll see throughout all of the budgeting over the years, that some things get shifted forward, some things get shifted ahead. It all depends upon, at what level do we think that risk is there. And if it's a high risk, then we try and get to it right away.
Okay, additional questions? Okay, Councillor Savage, go ahead. You haven't had a turn yet.
Yes, thank you. I've got a few simple questions, a bunch of comments with questions and so on, but I'll stick to just a few to start with. And one of the reasons I like to have things itemized, like they have been in past years, is so that you can see where the increases are. And so the first item, 145,600 for wage and benefit increases. Every year I'm used to seeing that at least somewhat broken down. And so you can follow the CUPE increases, for example, each year. So it's part of the breakdown of other things, but can council get a breakdown, please, of how much of that is the CUPE increase? I want to compare that to previous years, and how much is the staff management increase, and what's the nature of those increases? That's an enormous amount for wage and benefit increases. In 1 year, 145,000. So that's the first question, please.
So your worship, through you to Councillor Savage, there is a breakdown. So if you went to every departmental schedule, you can see the breakdown by department. So you can see how much of it is in general government, how much is in fire services, how much is in planning and community services. If you added the wages and benefits lines
that's
I've not
fine.
finished, Councillor Savage. So we have never provided a breakdown in the increase between CUPE and exempt staff in the past. If again, that is the direction of council to do so, we would be able to do that. But as far as I'm aware, you know that I just explained to you during the presentation that the exempt staff increase was based on the CPI index for Victoria. And we don't break benefit costs out separately from for CUPE staff versus management staff. So it would be a very difficult exercise to do. And I don't think there would be any benefit in doing that. Essentially, you know that the CUPE increase, I mean, if getting into percentages, I think you had that question in your questions to staff, and that can be provided. It could also impact our negotiations with CUPE in the upcoming negotiations. So I believe that question would be better answered in a closed meeting in terms of what those percentage provisions are, if you need more information to that degree, unless I can provide it to you in an open meeting, but it may impact our future negotiations.
Yeah, so eventually I'd like it. It's each year in the budget we have been provided that, not as a line item, it just as with the literature we get, as I recall, each year. Anyway, the next one is bylaw services, and could I just get the total proposed cost, please, for 2023? That's the one thing that's been missing. Bylaw enforcement officer, what's the total of her proposed amount, please, for 2023?
Hold on just a sec. I will give that to you. It was included in the budget materials. If you go to the protective, there's a bylaws section. And in the bylaws section, the contract for professional fees is 99,200, but that includes animal and welfare as well. I can separate those two components out.
That's the question. Thank you.
Okay. So I can provide that information to you. I don't have it in front of me right now.
Thank you. And then the next one is...
by the way, just for your reference, I'm pointing at page 18 of 29 of the budget book. There is a bylaws section there. That's where I would break that cost out for you, Councillor Savage.
Okay, and the next one, this is, you may not have the answer now, but I'd like it looked into, is we passed just a few months ago a software for asset management. I voted against it because I thought it's such a simple thing to do. There's better ways to do it, I thought, for not spending the money. But the question is, I've never seen this annual licensing amount before. Maybe I just missed it. But with this new one we approved, would that also have an annual license fee? I thought that was a one-time expense. If someone can answer that, please.
I believe there is a licensing fee associated with almost all of our software that we have.
Oh, okay.
So citywide included.
All right, so maybe we could get that. I didn't see it in the budget, that new one we just passed. It's asset management software.
Yes, that software is also critical for our basically our tangible assets reporting. So in our financial statements, when you take a look at our capital assets schedules with the amortization and disposal of assets and everything, that information is all driven out of that software system.
Yeah,
and it is
it's just,
not-
sorry.
And to your comment earlier, sir, it is not a simple thing to do without a software package.
Yeah, it was a point of privilege, please. Thank you. I could, if we could just please answer my questions, because I find it takes a lot of time. So all I wanted to know is the amount of licensing it will be for that software, and that was it. Thank you. So if we can get that. And then the next one is there's another example of how I like things separated, is the total amount of legal, please, what the legal costs are projected to be for 2023. That's under legal audit and insurance. It's got 181,000, but I would like to know how much the legal is so we can follow all these legal increases each year, please.
So what
So, Your
page are you
Worship.
referring to, Councillor Savage?
Well, in the budget, it would be under,
Because every section does have that as a line item. Excuse me.
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Savage, the roll-ups are in accordance with standard roll-ups that other municipalities use as well. So I would advise against it. However, I mean, council is more than welcome to come into municipal chambers and take a look at our line item budgets to see what those are. I don't basically advise in breaking our public reporting of budget information to a more detailed level than what is currently provided.
yeah, it's page 12, and it's near the third paragraph from the bottom. And the reason I ask this is, how on earth can the public or council follow the increase in legal fees unless we get a breakdown of exactly what the legal fees were last year and what they're proposed to be for this year, that's all. So it's third paragraph from the bottom.
Yeah, if council makes a motion, I have no objection to providing that.
Okay, I move that council be provided the legal fees total from last year and projected for 2023.
Sorry, I'm going to need you to repeat that. I didn't
Okay,
get my
so
pen quick
yeah,
enough.
just a little bit slower, Councillor Savage.
Yeah, I move that council be provided the total legal fees from 2022 and the projected legal fees for 2023.
Okay, and
So 2022 is not finished yet, so it's going to be, information that's a month old from when we've got the last bill?
Yeah.
Or did you want the actual from 2021?
Oh, I see. Yeah, I'm sorry, 2021. Thank you.
well, I was going to make an amendment to
Or
include
year to date.
2021 and then do, 2022, the to date, total to date.
Yeah, that's better.
Unless you just want to do your motion as 2021.
Yeah, no, we've got
2022 to
2021
date.
already. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, sorry, 2022 to date, year to date, YTD.
Do you want 2021 as well? Or that's a complete?
We've already got that, I believe.
I don't think we do.
Okay, we'll add 2021, 2022 year to date, and projected legal costs for 2023.
Is that the budget for 2023?
Yes.
Okay.
Projected legal budget, yeah. Okay, and I believe it's seconded by Councillor Lerner for discussion. Councillor Savage? Nothing? Okay. Councillor Lerner, it's a seconder.
No, I actually have a motion that'll go even
then to the
have
rest
some
of
more
it.
later, but
Pardon?
I won't speak to that now. I'll make my motion in a minute. So in the meantime, I support this, yes.
Okay, and then to the rest of the body. Okay, hearing or seeing nothing, I will call the question on the motion. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. All right, so Councillor Savage.
Yes, and last one, please, is if we were to choose with suites and carriage houses to have a way of exercising a tax levy on them, plus a water meter, separate water meter for each one, either a suite or a carriage house. How would we go about executing that?
So, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Savage, I believe that water meters are based on, or fixed water charges are based on the number of units that are dwellings that are on a property already. So if there are 2 dwellings on a property, they would be charged 2 times. And if there were 3, they're charged 3 times the fixed rate. In terms of extra levy, you cannot, all of those fall within Class 1 residential. You cannot charge a different rate for a property because they have a suite on it. They are both Class 1 residential and they would have the same rate applied to them. What would likely happen is if you have a carriage home or a secondary structure, your assessed value would probably be higher. And as a result, you would be paying more property tax.
Yeah, so for example, as part of a rezoning application, is there a method where one could levy some sort of initial payment if there was a carriage house proposed or a suite as part of, say, a cash amenity contribution? That would be one example of a way to facilitate getting some money back for these things that are an economic loss right now.
I don't know the answer to that. That would be outside of the scope of my budgeting exercise. Perhaps our planner, our director of planning might know the answer to that. All I'm aware of is that when it comes to property taxation, you cannot apply different rates within a property class. The same rate applies to all properties within Class 1 residential.
Right, it takes more research then. All right, thank you. That's it for me for now.
Okay, Councillor Lerner, go ahead.
Thank you. I do have a motion that I'll make after this question, but I just wanted to ask regarding the Dickinson Road replacement, which I see is for 2023 and 2024. It has $2.4 million followed by $1.8 million, which, if I understand correctly, without additional funding, puts us in an almost, by December 31st, 2024, puts us in an almost $1 million deficit in the asset replacement, drainage, and transportation infrastructure reserve. Is that correct?
That reserve balance will have to be updated now because there was some of the funding from that reserve going towards the multi-use path. But yes, you are correct that we were in a deficit position and we would have had to reevaluate capital projects in our outer years.
Okay, thank you. So I think there's a lot of discussion tonight that I'm going to make a motion that hopefully we'll address. And it's a lengthy motion, so I did provide the wording in advance to staff, and then I've also printed copies so that people can follow along because it was just such a wordy motion. So hopefully people can read that. There's hopefully enough copies there. If not, I have more. So I'll wait for that to go around. Okay, so it's the motion reads that council direct staff to provide by the November 30th, 2022 regular council meeting copies of the itemized budget for independent review, including but not limited to 2021 actual amounts, 2022 projected amounts, 2022 year-to-date actual amounts, 2022 variance calculated amounts, and 2023 proposed amounts. And further that the 2022 council meeting schedule be amended to remove the November 28th, 2022 special council meeting and to add 2 special council meetings to be held January 9th, 2023 and January 23rd, 2023, both at 6 p.m. PST in the Council Chamber Municipal Hall, 2nd floor, 7192 Lantzville Road, Lantzville, BC, to consider District of Lantzville 2023 to 2027 Financial Plan Bylaw number 325-2022. And then there's a report that follows, which I don't have to read, but that includes some information I can speak to during the moving process. It also includes samples of budgets provided by other municipalities throughout the BC and Pacific Northwest area. So I can speak to that when we discuss the motion. Thank you.
Okay, do we have a seconder to this? So second by Councillor Jones. So for discussion, go ahead, Councillor Lerner.
Yes, I see a lot of discussion tonight where there's questions about specifics, about breakdowns. There's questions about year-to-date for 2022 versus the projected amount for 2022, whether it came in under or over, the variance related to that, how that differs from the 2023 proposed amount. I do see some breakdowns in here. It's a detailed plan, but I'm used to working with budgets that actually have line items with specific amounts. I think it'll be helpful for a new council to come in and be able to see that. We're required to carry out financial responsibilities and fiduciary duties. I believe this will best be fulfilled for a new council with a full knowledge of the budget. It gives us a 360-degree picture of what we're going into for the next 4 years and a 5-year plan. As far as the second part of the motion, I believe that it provides us with a little more time to digest that and for staff as well. So instead of meeting on November 28th, this would push this until January. I'm under the impression that we don't have to finalize the budget in December. It also provides time for more public review and input. As a result, we could continue to in between January 9th and the 23rd, we could even hold a town hall or some other facilitation to encourage public input. I know the the Local Government Act and Community Charter both refer to public consultation. I know there's input periods at meeting, but I believe public consultation goes beyond that. Having these additional meetings gives us the time to review the information provided and for the public to actually come and make those comments. Of course, I'm totally open to changing those dates. Those are 2 special meetings on Monday nights in January, but that pushes our schedule a little further, and it removes the immediate November 28th. As for the information provided, it shows in there the examples of budgets. So the first 2 are from the City of Richmond, which provides quarterly public budgets, including the change in and the year-to-date variances for the public to see. Not that we need to go into that much detail publicly, but it does break it down. As far as the second page also shows the year-to-date budget versus year-to-date actual and the variance amount in thousands of dollars for the legal and legislative services, which I know was discussed earlier tonight. And then finally, the next page provides an example of the last page provides an example of a budget with additional breakdown with comparative to years actual and adopted budget. So I just believe this level of detail for a new council helps us fulfill our duty and to the public, and also helps the public understand what they're looking at. I know that the average mentioned tonight was 8%, but that was an average of small changes at the waste level and more than 11% at the tax level. And we're looking at an 11% suggestion. I think we really need detailed information and a lot of public input. So thank you.
Okay, Councillor Jones is the seconder, if you wish.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Lerner, for that. My stress level's gone down already. I do find it extremely difficult flipping back and forth between all these pages, trying to compare something here to something there. It just doesn't suit my sense of organization as well as a detailed line-by-line budget would, so I appreciate those examples from you. I also feel I have a responsibility to this community, and that responsibility I made quite clear when running for council, which was that I would not be supporting an increase in taxes this year, and an 11% increase in this budget is a far cry from zero. And in order to advise and interpret the financial plan, I definitely need much more detail than I have now. So I appreciate that, Councilor Lerner. I'm not sure about the dates. They might be a little bit too rushed, not only for myself and residents, but perhaps even for Director Hare as well. So I might wonder if we would consider perhaps the January 23rd being the first time, and for a special council meeting, and then having one shortly after. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Mundell, got it correct this time?
Thank you. Just a few comments. I actually am also glad to hear that we're requesting a little bit more detailed version. I have more marks in this binder than I've ever done on any homework assignment I've ever had. And a lot of that is questions around what is this? What are the details around this? What a little more explanation required. What are these costs associated with? So yeah, I would definitely appreciate a little more detail, and that would really help answer a lot of questions around some fees. Like again, 1 year we have fees of $125, and the next year $9,200. Why? Like every time I write, I have what is happening here? Why is this such a big change? And there's just no explanation for that in the copy that we currently have to work with. So I would really appreciate that. I know it will be a little more work, but it'll definitely help answer a lot more questions. And I as well, made a commitment to really be thorough with the financial assessment and review for this year and years going forward. So in order to, I feel like, move forward on the budget, I need more questions answered. So thank you.
Okay, additional speakers, Councillor Savage, go ahead.
Yes, I'll certainly support this. It's just the idea is if we're looking, and I've got a number of ways which I'll talk about in a while about hopefully increasing income, and then also on the other side, decreasing costs. And I can't do that without specifics. And so I've got all the budget binders in the past 4 years, and it's so easy to look up things and to follow them. For example, the municipal hall, Costin Hall and Church are all broken into separate columns showing the contribution and the current balance in their replacement reserve funds. It just makes it so easy. I'm used to seeing snow clearing costs each year following the amount. So if it's a particularly heavy year, I can look back and say instantly, oh, that's how much it costs compared to the lighter years. This is all part of overseeing finances. And in business, that's all that I did as an exercise. At the start of each year was going through where specific detailed costs could be cut and specific streams of income could be increased. It was never general and lumped together. I always like to see things individualized, and also for the sake of time, if we have to make a motion every time we want a detail, that's a very cumbersome way to do it, and it also prevents us from getting information while we're at home in between the 2 weeks of meetings, so that we can quickly get information and assemble our route forward as it is. And I also agree with Councillor Jones. For me, it would likely be a little better having the 2 meetings later in November, in January, just because that will be after our priorities, which is important too, to establish direction and so on. Thank you.
Guess that just leaves me. I'll I'll kind of finish off on what Councillor Savage was driving at, and that's our strategic priority sessions that we'll be holding, and we'll be holding one in December, real brief one, and then we'll get into more of it in January. But with this, what that will allow us to do in conjunction with getting a better grasp on the budget and so forth is really establish our strategic priorities and make sure that all the budgetary considerations are taken, as well as the financial planning considerations are taken as well, because whatever initiatives that we have as a council that we'd like to accomplish over the 4-year term, we need to plan that out, and it's going to take probably a little bit more careful planning to do so. So, we will have to make sure we have a good handle on the budget. I anticipate that next year's budget and the budget after that the whole process will go a lot faster, but I think it's really important to make sure everybody's comfortable with the understanding the information and making sure that we definitely establish a sound budget moving forward that's going to work in conjunction with this council's priorities. So in terms of the dates, I think the dates they work. I don't have my calendar in front of me, but it doesn't quite mesh up with the strategic planning, but that's okay. I think we can roll with it. Maybe Director Coates, if you've got the
I
2
have
days.
the calendar up. So January 9th, the office reopens on the 3rd. That means the agenda would go out on the 5th for a meeting on the 9th. And then the other question was, you have the 18th and 19th for strategic planning, and then the other meeting proposed is the 23rd. So and then you have a long session on the 25th because there's, what do you call it, the newly elected session.
Yeah.
So the 30th was still open if you wanted to push back.
Yeah, through to council, I'm just thinking out loud here, but perhaps the January 9th and 23rd to amend it to the 16th and 30th. But anyways, just to throw that out there. But Councillor Lerner, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just I don't want to make this too tight for staff, especially if the office reopens on the 3rd, and since our strategic planning is the 18th and 19th, meeting on the 16th to discuss budget and hear from the public will then allow us to bring that into our strategic planning on the 18th and then continue that with another meeting on the 23rd. So I would like to amend my motion to change January 9th to read January 16th and January 23rd to read January 30th. Thank you.
I'll second that. For discussion, Councillor Lerner,
No discussion, thank you.
Director Coates.
Sorry, I was remiss in not mentioning too that the standard practice is that the budget gets done in the fall so that the projects can start in January. This new schedule will definitely push projects out further to when they'll be issued for RFP and could have cost impacts.
And I think I've mentioned that at a previous meeting as well, that, historically, and even the beginning of the last term, there was a definite change, on how we're dealing with our budgets, and it was to try and get the budget done earlier, and that way everything was decided upon, so staff could then move forward on projects earlier in the year, where generally you can get better rates and so forth. But I think it's probably not going to work for this council, and I think delaying things by a month is probably the way it's going to be. And I would encourage this council to try and get it done by the end of January, because it does push out putting various projects out to tender and will likely result in higher costs to the municipality. So there is an urgency to get this done, but I think for the sake of a month and kind of going more in tangent with our, or more in line with our strategic priority sessions, I think it's probably best we go this direction this time for this year. So I think we have Councillor Mundell and then Councillor Savage.
Just noting that I am actually away the 16th of January. I will not be able to be in attendance for that, and I'm not sure that I can attend remotely because I will likely be on the road traveling that day.
Okay.
I don't know how to amend it. We can't really amend an amendment, but
Well, it's best just
It's
to
just a
vote on
calendar.
this amendment and then we just kill it and then just re-amend it. But the other option too is we can always poll council and deal with this at another time, so. But if we want to get dates in there.
if it's all
get
right with the
dates.
seconder, I'll withdraw my amendment and remake one.
No, let's just vote on it.
Okay.
I'll just call the question, just vote it down. That's probably the easiest way of doing it. So I'll call the question on the amendment. So all those in favor and opposed, noting that's unanimously opposed, so that's the amendment fails. So we're just back to the main motion. So if you want to propose different dates.
Yeah, in that case, I'll just say one special meeting to be held January 30th, and then we can always hold more in the future if needed. That would be my suggestion. I know we want to get this, or we could say January 23rd. I'm wondering to the chair how we would poll council. I don't know the procedure for that.
23rd, I think works.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody, it's probably going to work for me. So I
would just say one meeting on the 23rd, and then we can have another one on the 30th if we decide to at that time. But the idea would be that we would hold it on January 23rd. So it would read to add one special council meeting to be held January 23rd, and then strike the word both. It says at 6 p.m. and it continues from there.
yeah. All right. So through to Director Coates, did you catch the amendment?
That council amends the motion on the floor by striking, quote, two special council meetings to be held January 9th, 2023 and January 23rd, 2023, and inserting, quote, one special council meeting to be held January 30th, comma, 2023.
Sorry, January 23rd. Sorry, January 23rd, yeah.
Okay.
All right. And do we have a seconder to the amendment? Second by Councillor Savage for discussion. Oh, yes.
Oh, sorry, my mic's not on. I had striking the January 23rd, so it'd just be striking, quote, two special council meetings to be held January 9th, 2023, and then inserting one special council meeting to be held, and then it would just read right through to January 23rd.
Yeah, and striking the word both, but yeah.
Yeah, she got that.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah. So as far as discussion goes, I think it's pretty straightforward. We're just trying to settle on a date here, so I won't add to that.
Okay. Councillor Mundell, hopefully the 23rd works.
23rd looks good. Could we not do the 30th as well if we need those two dates? Because I think the 30th is fine by me as well.
I think that's fine. I don't want to draw out this too long, so I'm just thinking we could do the 23rd now, and then if we needed to add the 30th at that time, we could.
I thought we needed
We
two
may-
meetings for adoption. Or like,
I'll defer to the chair.
We may need more time between the 23rd and the meeting that follows based on the amendments or whatever future amendments are made. That may require, some significant changes to the financial plan, and it'll allow staff a little bit more time to respond to bring that back at a future meeting date. So it may be that beginning of February is when we meet again to finalize the budget and then give it its first few readings and then be in a position where we can present to the public and then adopt kind of thing. So. All right, Councillor Savage, discussion on amendment.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to flesh out a little bit this idea of why we try to get budgets done by the start of the year. And another factor is if you start your projects later in the year, the people available can be dried up, and in which case perhaps costs can go up and so on. I had thought of that, but I think this is the one year where I just want to slow everything down in terms of projects and spending, make sure we get the right direction and the right tax increase, if any, or reduction, whatever. So this is the one year where doesn't bother me at all. We're going slow on this. So, and just the other quick thing, if I may, while we're on the topic, is perhaps a little more in the future we can do these dates by polling rather than trying to do it in the meeting. I remember the last term we got caught up in a lot of this. We all were doing it. So just something to keep in mind when we're making these motions. Thank you.
Okay. All right, unless there's anything further, I will call a question on amendment. Okay, hearing or seeing nothing. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Back to the main motion as amended. Anything further? Okay, I'll call the question then. All those in favor and opposed? That's carried unanimously as well. So that's just setting the future meeting date. In terms of additional questions for staff, this is the time. So Councillor Jones.
Thank you. This will be a question for Director Hare, but if you could please bear with me for a little bit of preamble. If we go to section 4 in the binder, page 10, you'll see there's a rather attractive circle diagram on asset management for sustainable service delivery. I appreciated that and took the opportunity to look into it a little bit further. Online in particular at the Asset Management BC website. And I was very excited to see there something that many communities in BC are now doing, which is doing an inventory and assigning a value to that inventory, as well as maintenance and improvement for that asset. And I'm speaking of natural assets. Aquifers, wetlands, forests, treed areas, streams, creeks, vegetation, soil, foreshore. We're so fortunate here in Lantzville. We have an abundance of natural assets. We are the envy of many, many larger communities around BC. I think many of you know that in 2014, Gibson started looking at valuing these natural assets, and now I see online at Asset Management BC that there are a number of resources for local government and for staff, several primers actually on how to start incorporating natural assets into our asset management plans. I think we'll talk about this more in our strategic priorities, but it's something that excites me quite a lot because these natural assets have the ability to reduce our costs as they are currently. Assets are primarily evaluated as engineered infrastructure, so that will certainly be nice to reduce costs, but there are numerous other advantages to managing our natural assets. So where I'm going with that, other than just really hoping we can get on board, as so many other municipalities in BC are quite a bit ahead of us on this. My question is just with respect to natural assets. I did actually find some reference to them in section 4 on page 4, and I'm wondering if you could clarify, please. On that table there under water utility, you have some descriptions of assets, the engineered ones like pump stations, distribution and supply mains, reservoirs, then also natural assets is written there. And also under the drainage, the row for drainage, culverts, mains, and again, we see the words natural assets. Could you please direct me where in the financial plan these natural assets are assigned a value and perhaps even information on maintenance and improvement of them in the future? Thank you.
From my understanding, I've only been here for a year, but I have not seen any natural assets listed in our asset registers, and we do not we do not attribute a value for natural assets. So we have not embarked on the exercise of accounting for natural assets. But and asset management is an organization-wide collective effort. So I don't know if Director Spears may have something to add to that.
Through your worship to the council, thus far we actually have not taken a tally, I guess, of our natural assets. It's something that is kind of on the radar, but due to the lack of capacity, it's kind of been sitting on the back burner for quite some time.
Thank you. So I gather then that that's just an error that natural assets is listed in that table. And I look forward in the future to us all having discussions on this. Thank you.
Okay, additional questions for staff? Councillor Mundell and then Councillor Savage.
All right, on page 13 of 29, I just have a question about one of the one-time operating projects on the list here. There's prepare a concept plan for Village West Spa. And I'm just curious, is this a typical procedure that municipalities prepare concept plans for spas? I thought that was usually the process of the developer.
I will refer that question to actually Director Limshu.
Your worship, through the council. Yeah, the spa is a special plan area, just for everybody's information. The reason why I had put this on the list is because in that special plan area, it's comprised of multiple properties with a number of different property owners. And the purpose of the exercise is really to start the dialogue and get some idea of a vision, if you will, as to what that area could entail, rather than waiting for individual applications to come forward and development occurs sort of ad hoc and piecemeal. When you look at the other special planning areas within the OCP, there are larger pieces, comprising of very few property owners, in most cases one or two. But in this particular case, like I said, there are multiple planning property owners. Everyone has different timing, different vision. And the thought there was, let's sort of get ahead of it and get some ideas going, so that the property owners have an idea as to what to expect when they do come forward with an application, and an idea as to what the community is expecting to see when they come forward with the application.
Thank you for that. Just a thought that it might be worthwhile having or hosting some sort of roundtable discussion, but maybe not necessarily footing the bill at $15,000 for it. As we're trying to be mindful of expenditures, just that one was one that kind of jumped out at me. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Savage.
Yes, I've got some ideas for us to think on, and some questions may emanate from them in terms of increasing income. And this is just a few first blush ones. So we've got a managed forest mill rate, and I researched a bit what other mill rates are. Ours are either 12.4584 and a bit, or 13.3588. There's a provincial list of all these, so one is provincial, the other was in our budget last year, the amount. But just by comparison, if you take that 12 mill rate versus Cumberland's got a 36 point, et cetera, mill rate, so that's 12 times ours. and they do have a lot of forest lands up there, so I'll be phoning a few of these places to find out what's up with why they've done that. Ladysmith is 30 point, et cetera, mill rate. And Tass is amazing. I got to find out why it's 370 point, et cetera, mill rate. So there's one way we can increase some income. We've got some, obviously, the Timber West is our biggest forestry land, and then other pieces of the woodlot and so on. And part of the woodlot is Crown land, and I'm assuming, we'll investigate, but the non-Crown land would be able to increase the mill rate on. I believe just because it's a woodlot, we can still apply mill rates. And then the second one is, I'm not so high on this one, and just to give, getting back to the forestry, just to give you an idea of the money involved, we have approximately $4,939,000 in tax assessed value of our forestry lands. And if you multiply that by the 13, et cetera, mill rate, that gives us $65,000 and a bit in our current mill rate. So if those were to double, we'd get another 65,000. Not that I'm suggesting we double it, but that gives you the idea of the scale of money we're talking here. So there's one way to increase our income and to try to help other taxpayers out. Number two, this is a question through to staff, please, who might know, and that is, does the district have the sole authority to raise ALR mill rates, or is there a provincial aspect to it as well?
Your worship, through you to Councillor Savage. I mean, your questions came by email today, but I believe that the assessment that you talked about in forestry, I looked at the assessed value for 2022, and I believe it was 1/3 of the amount that you just quoted. But we can confirm that. I will respond to your question via email. Also, comparing our mill rates to other mill rates for forest managed lands is like comparing apples to oranges. We currently charge 8 times the residential rate to managed forestry lands, and that's how you come out to that $12 and something cents per $1,000 assessed value. So the communities that you just mentioned, their residential mill rates are likely much higher than our residential mill rate. So I haven't done any analysis on what their multiples would be, but so you'd have to look at a lot more information before jumping to the conclusion that you could raise it by that amount. So generally, the principle of taxes is also you have multiples to reflect the effort of municipal efforts that go into providing services to those particular tax classes. And that's why usually the multiple and tax rate for the business class and the industrial class is higher than for the residential class due to a combination of their ability to pay and due to the combination of the amount of resources that they consume. So it would become a question of equity in terms of what your multiple is. So that would be a policy exercise that council would have to go through when they have much more information than what you currently provided.
Yes, Mike, Mike, now you're singing my tune. I've been saying this for 4 years. You cannot compare mill rates between municipalities without a deep amount of research. You cannot compare tax rates between municipalities without a great deal of research. So thank you for confirming that. Now, my question was, does the district had nothing to do with forestry, but it's ALR. Does the district have the sole authority to raise ALR mill rates, or is there a provincial aspect to it as well?
I don't know the answer to that. I'd have to look into that. I don't believe there is any restriction, but I would have to I'd have to look into that.
Yeah, and that's something that I'm not advocating to the degree of forestry or the next one. And that's simply because there's residents that live on these properties, so they count as well as not wanting to, raise taxes and so on. However, their tax assessed rates are so low, tax assessed values are so low that when if you've got light industrial or business operations going on an ALR land, that's not fair that they're paying such low rates where others with light industry are paying 7 times the residential rate. So it's just something to look into, but I'm certainly not leaning towards increasing taxes on where people live. And then the third one is utilities also have mill rates. And just to give you an idea, not that it means anything but a first blush look, but Lantzville's approximately 35 point something mill rate compared to Comox 40 point something, and these are for utilities. Cumberland again is high, 54 point et cetera mill rate, and Qualicum 39 point et cetera mill rate, Tofino 40, Ucluelet 40. So my question is, please, can we get just a bit of an overview on what are these utilities and the nature of the mill rate and so on with them, but just basically why they're taxed and what are they?
So I'd have to take a look at what the exact utilities are, but they I don't have an answer to that for you right now. But what I do know and what I can tell you is that there is a maximum multiple for utilities, and we are near the maximum cap for what we can charge for utility rates.
Great. Maybe we could find out the maximum then, if we could, please. Just looking for ways to increase income. Thank you. And the other one is I'm hoping also, this is not something that will necessarily appear on our more detailed budget, but when we got the LED lights, we replaced all our street lights with the old type and put in the LED lights. And there can be a big savings with this. BC Hydro told me if you go to, I believe it's the 35 watt or 39 watt, I forget what it is, that's when you really get the big savings. And we're, I think, mostly the 70 watt. So I'm curious as to what our savings is and what they could be if we, in certain areas, we put the lower wattage in. For example, those little lights that light up the sidewalks on the way to the foothills, which actually serve as street lights, they're only 14 watts, so that's quite a hydro savings for our district. Again, another tax savings. So if it's possible, Director Hare, at some point, if we could get a comparative of a full year of what they were with the old lights versus a full year of what they are with our new LED lights, I'd just be interested to see what the savings are. And the last one, I believe this is a budget, correct me if I'm wrong, but the sewer rates are based on water consumption is part of the equation. So is it a budget item or issue? Is this the time to, if we wanted to change that to a straight parcel tax versus a water consumption tax on sewer rates, is now the time to do it?
It can be done at any time. It's part of the miscellaneous fees and charges bylaw, but it would impact our annual revenue. So the sewer rate is not a fully variable rate, as you have mentioned. It is a combination of a flat and variable rate. So we have flat sewer charge. We have a flat charge, which is what was included in your budget package. And then for those properties that consume more than the, I guess, above the allotted level of water, so overconsumption, that translates over to sewer as well. What comes out of the system goes out of the system as well. So it's, I believe the overcharge is based on 67% of the overcharged volume, and then there's a variable rates applied to that. So it's a combination of a flat and variable rate for sewer charges. And playing with that rate is a very complex exercise. We probably, in terms of determining the revenues, that like modeling variable consumption, because it changes, would essentially, we're very heavy towards the fixed charge than we are to the variable charge. And that's to ensure that our costs of operations are recovered. So I'm not sure what you're suggesting at this point in terms of moving towards a more variable rate structure or remaining with a fixed structure, but we don't have the resources in-house. We had done this in West Vancouver as well. Very, very complicated exercise when you're looking at adjusting the balance between the variable and fixed rates to balance those to be able to recover the operating costs of the utility.
Yeah, no, what I'm suggesting is that we take the total income from, say, 2022 when we have it, and that we divide that by the number of users, and that gives you a flat rate for every single user for the next year, and you might want to add 10% cushion just to make sure you had enough, and just to eliminate metering of sewage charge completely because it's so inaccurate. So is that something that would be simple to do? Just do a flat rate for everyone?
I wouldn't recommend doing that as part of the budget process. I think you need to take time and look at all of the factors and take all of the factors into consideration in reviewing your model. Most municipalities will look at, if you're looking at changing the rate structure, that is a totally separate exercise that should be done outside of the budget exercise to ensure that you don't run into any problems in collecting enough revenue to operate your utility.
Yep. Okay, I'll make that motion for probably December 7th. And just to follow up with that, it's amazing how many people I've heard this from, just literally dozens and dozens, and a lot of them are seniors that find that it's very onerous to charge because they use their home, so it's more of a hobby, gardening, and they grow their own food to save money, and that's all offset by all this increase in charges. So the water consumption for gardening has nothing to do with flushing a toilet or water down the sink and so on. And also then it's off topic, so I'll leave that for another one, the gray water legislation. So those are some ideas for saving or for increasing income. Thank you.
Worship, what I will add to what I had said earlier is our rate structure model is aligned with best practices and what most other municipalities are doing with respect to consumption. So both water and sewer rates do have a variable component, and that is there to promote conservation.
Yes, get you. Okay, thank you for that. We'll look into it more after we get the motion done. Thanks.
Okay, I just have a couple kind of follow-up comments and then, yeah. Oh, yeah, you'll have a chance. Okay, so, yeah, with respect to just the sewer talk, it's, maybe things need to be updated because I think maybe these best practices maybe didn't factor in the spring and early summer that people may have increased water consumption because they are now growing more food on their properties. So I think it is something to look at. I don't ever hear people complaining about their water rates. just out of the blue, but people are now starting to complain about what they're getting charged for sewer because they're now growing more in the spring and, or, you know, using more water in the spring and early summer for growing vegetables and so forth and fruit. So, yeah, I'd support a review of that. I think it's probably in order for sure. Because again, I think it's, I don't think everybody's that grows vegetables are sitting there by their toilet flushing it on the hour just to get that increased water consumption up and sewer outflow, right? So I think they're using it for a good purpose and shouldn't be charged for that. Based on the sewer piece. With respect to the ALR mill rate conversation, Councillor Savage brought up, you know, again, I think the low rates again are meant to encourage farming activities. So, and typically it's based on the low valuation of land. The other one to take into consideration is people that actually have farm status, so they're on non-ALR land but have acquired farm status. Again, if you look at their assessments, they'll have a low valuation on their land, and principally the bulk of the assessment is based on their house essentially. So again, it's the reward there is to people for you know to do farming activities, and then they get a break on taxes. My concern always is when you have ALR land users that are not using it for land or that for farming purposes, and they get the tax break. So you chunk off a 1 hectare lot and build a house, maybe a carriage house, and there's no farming activities, but they get the enormous tax break. And I don't know if there's any, maybe Director Hare, if you know if there's anything in the works that those properties would be exempt from the ALR tax breaks.
Your worship, through you to the rest of council, we do not have any influence in whether property is categorized as farmland versus that's all BC assessment. So I'm not aware of anything in the works to change that. We simply we apply tax rates based on the assessments that are made by BC assessment. And so essentially BC assessment determines the tax class of properties, and so whether they would be farm class property versus residential.
Yeah, and that's what I figured, but thanks for the response, Councillor Jones.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Savage, for bringing that up about the sewer billing and water consumption. We have an excellent letter here from one resident, Brian Blood, who mentions several components for us to consider in this, and I hope that we will have the time to talk about it. But one of them is the need to do basically everything that we can as a community to make it easy for people to grow their own food. It is, I believe, our responsibility to some of the challenges of climate change that as a community we do that, and as an island we do that. I think most of you know that in the neighborhood of 80 to 90% of our food comes from off island, and there's a lot of transportation costs in just getting food here. So we have some work to do in a larger picture around this question. As for when we do it, I was a little bit confused. I think Councillor Savage, you mentioned December 6th. I don't think that's a council meeting anymore. Would we discuss this further at a committee of the whole meeting when we get those up and running, or what would you advise?
I believe we have a council meeting on, it's either the 6th or 7th. 7th? Yeah. So I guess, yeah, Councillor Savage can bring that motion forward to the December 7th. There's still time to get it on that agenda if that's what he chooses to do.
Thank you. Excellent.
And then you can have a special meeting on that topic if you wish.
Yeah, we can do a special meeting, exactly, suspend the rules, have a big old discussion, or when the committee of the whole comes around, if it does come around, then we can save it for then as well. Did you have anything further, Councillor Jones?
No, thank you, not
Okay,
this time.
Councillor Lerner?
Thank you. Through your worship to the staff, I did have 3 quick questions. in section 1 of the financial plan, page 14 of 29, there is the mention of a coming out of the operating project reserve, a council and staff compensation review. And I'm just wondering, it says $15,000, which I was just wondering, what is that, an external consultant? Is there a mandate to do that with an external consultant? What is the cost that's involved in the 15,000?
Your worship, through you to Councillor Lerner, that was an estimate for a compensation review to be done, and I believe there was a review of internal resources done about 4 years ago. So typically municipalities will do a compensation review for both council and their senior management team to make sure that salaries are in line with both regional and with basically other salaries of similar positions to comparable municipalities.
Okay, thank you. And is that done in-house, or is the 15,000
No,
for an
that-
external consultant?
For an external consultant.
Okay, thank you. And then on page 20 of 29, under transportation services, roads and drainage, it talks about the wages and benefit increase, which I know was explained before with the public works increase of staff proposed. But under contractor and professional fees, it goes from 3,700 to 11,100, which is a tripling in 1 year from the budget. And is that to reflect the actual in 2022? Is there a reason that we're expecting it to triple?
Councillor Spears may be able to answer your question off the bat. Otherwise, you will receive, based on your motion, a line item budget, and you'll be able to determine from that, which line items essentially constitute that increase. However, do you have the answer to that right now, Director Spears, or?
Sorry, no, I don't actually have that in front of me exactly broken out.
And I don't have that line item budget in front of me either. So that information will be available to you in the line item budget that you've requested.
Okay, great. Thank you. One final question, which is regarding the fire hall construction. I know that there was the grant application, which can issue a maximum of, I think, 6 million, if I understand correctly. I see a fire hall construction in the budget for 2023 of 7 million. So does that mean that it would be 7 million minus the 6 million grant for a total of 1 million? Or is the 7 additional million? Because I think there was talk of reducing the cost. I just threw to Director Hare or Director Spears. I'm just trying to, or Director Limshaw, not sure who would answer that, but is the 7 million in additional to the grant, or is part of the grant coming out of that?
Your worship, through you, Councillor Lerner, that includes the 6 million grant. So there would be $1 million funded through municipal contributions. So it is a total budget of $7 million. Based on a grant application for 6. The grant application, we need originally, as council is aware, I believe council is aware that the estimate came in much higher, and we are going to be contacting the I guess the provincial government where we have now basically, I believe, I haven't perhaps I'm going to call on Chief Ruckus in just a second, but through budget discussions, we've basically have a maximum provision of $7 million for the construction of the hall, which is far lower than original estimates that we had received. However, we need to advise the provincial government of that as well. The maximum funding to the provincial government or from the provincial government that was available is $6 million, regardless of what the budget for your project is.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And so then to follow up on that, if there's a $1 million difference, I see that that's set to come out of I believe the reserves, if that's correct, if I understand correctly. Are we able to search for and apply for additional grants to cover, or foundation grants or anything to cover that additional million, or are we required under the provision of the provincial grant to cover that out of our own reserves?
So Part of that 1 million, I believe, is coming from gas tax funds. They changed the eligibility requirements to allow you to fund fire halls. Previously, you could not use funds from that grant stream to fund municipal infrastructure such as fire halls. And part of it is coming from the fire halls facilities reserve.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Mundell and then Councillor Savage.
Yeah, just going back to page 13, I have a lot of questions on this page, almost on every item. But just want to hone in on the Parks Master Plan. I see that there's $100,000 allocated to this plan. And again, similar to the question Councillor Lerner had, is this going to be done in-house or is this going to be a contracted service that we need to hire to do this at the bill of $100,000?
Your worship, through you to Councillor Mundell, I'm going to call on Director Spears to answer that question, but my understanding is it is going to be done through a third-party contract. However, Director Spears?
Through your worship to council. Basically, the Parks Master Plan, the $100,000 is a placeholder. We're not expecting it to actually be that amount, but we really don't have any idea on what it would cost because council still has to go through the process and find out what it is specifically they are looking for. There has been discussions at the council table, I believe, in the past that basically identified initially we're looking at doing a full Parks Master Plan, and then there was discussion of doing just the Pierce Woods Parks Master Plan. So we're still kind of waiting in that zone of trying to figure out what level of parks plan that the council is looking for. It probably will become a lot clearer for this with the strategic planning session. So right now, the 100,000 is just basically a placeholder.
Okay, thank you. And then the next one below that, development cost charge review. I think this is timely, and I think this is an important one to take a look at for sure. I'm just curious as to, again, where does the $50,000 that's allocated to that review, where's that going?
Through your worship to council, that $50,000 was a budget estimate provided by the district's consultant engineers, Corrs and Associates. In the past, they have done the development cost charges bylaws for us. They actually produce a really good document. And this time around, it makes sense to have them do it because they're aware of all of the capital projects that we actually are in need of doing. So it's easy for them to incorporate those projects into that projects list to collect TCCs.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Savage.
Yes, I was not going to make any motions tonight to eliminate things from the budget or changes out of respect for our new councillors who would like more detail and more thought towards the budget. However, there is one that simply can't wait. It's timely, which I'll explain after I make the motion. And could you give this to Director Coates, please? Thank you. And the motion is that the district's bylaw enforcement services not be increased from 21 hours per week to 28 hours per week, and further that, as soon as possible, the district transitions back to contracting to the Regional District of Nanaimo to provide bylaw enforcement services instead of providing these services in-house.
Is there a seconder to the motion? Okay, seconded by Councillor Mundell. Discussion on the motion. Councillor Savage.
Yes, thank you. So this, it was around $36,000 when we left the regional district for their bylaw enforcement services. And I've always thought it's a much better deal going with the regional district for their services because they're so big, they have so many things in-house, from all the legal support to all the office staff support and so on. And it's such a savings if it still is that amount. We don't know yet. I'd like to find that out to what it is. Nevertheless, I still think it's a good idea to go back. And now we're getting right up into the 89,000, 90,000 range we're waiting to hear from that figure exactly. For our own bylaw officer, then it's just simply a good opportunity for a big savings. And we committed to the community we were going to reverse this 68%, this trend, which added up to a 68% tax increase over 4 years. So in reversing that trend, this is how I did all my business budgets. You just take one item at a time, and this is one that will be a big savings. And as well as that, I don't think Lantzville is ready for its own bylaw enforcement. I heard a fair amount of feedback, and bless the officer that was doing her best, believe me, but some of the feedback I got that it was becoming a little more strict or intrusive, whatever it is, with some people. That traditionally in Lantzville, they were used to a very light footprint of bylaw enforcement. So I'm seeing that perhaps people aren't, Lantzville's not quite ready for it. And in the future, if it becomes so onerous and we get so many requests for it, but you see, when we went to this officer, we were not inundated with tons of demand or requests for it. So I think it's the best way to operate. I never heard a lot of complaints about how it was before. And it's just like anything. Once you introduce a new item, it grows and grows and it grows. And that's particularly evident with all the staff increases we had the past 3 years, where over 7% now of our 11.34% tax increase is due to staffing issues. So once you bring these things on, they seem to take a life of themselves. And not only is that initial cost there, as we've seen, it goes up and up and up. And then you got tax increases on tax increases. And it's just, we've got to get control of all this. So this is, in my mind, the first thing to do. So those are my reasons. Thank you.
And through to the seconder.
Yeah, I'm actually interesting that you're hearing that it's strict, or if people are feeling that it's strict. A lot of people in my neighborhood don't see the value in it because they've tried to access the service repeatedly and have had no success. So it's been hard for me to see the value in this. And as I see the number going up for a part-time service, even at 28 hours, that's still very part-time. It's just really hard to reconcile that much, that amount of budget or tax dollars that would be going towards this. And I'm just having a lot of trouble trying to digest that number. Maybe also a question through to staff around the animal control. Did somebody mention $30,000 of that, or a good portion of that is going towards animal control? And for me, that's the first I've heard of this. And is that something necessary? I guess I'm just wondering where that's coming from. Anybody might.
I think that's probably a question for the director here.
Limshu? I think that would be a question for Director Limshu.
Your worship, to the council, the animal control budget, it's approximately 11,000. You'll certainly see this when you get the more detailed information. Um, so with respect to animal control, it it was a service that we previously contracted out with the RDN, but the RDN then subbed that out to the contractor that we're currently using. So rather than going through RDN, we're now dealing with the contractor directly.
And just another question about the contract that we currently have are there other options? Is this the only contract that we can acquire for this service, or is there something that we could look that would maybe meet our budget a bit better?
So just to be clear, are you just talking about animal control?
Sorry, no, bylaw services in general.
Just for council's information, contracting out bylaw enforcement services is actually fairly unique. Unlike contracting out for building inspection, there are a number of companies out there that do contract building inspection services. But when it comes to bylaw enforcement, yeah, we're fairly unique in that. So in terms of number of companies out there that offer that service, I do believe it's fairly limited. I mean, certainly we can research it further, but based on my understanding and through my discussions with other jurisdictions, there aren't very many jurisdictions in the province that contract bylaw enforcement.
Thank you. So based on that, it might, as Councillor Savage is recommending, it might be more prudent to go through the RDN's process and use their services for this because they are have a lot of experience and a lot more resources. So I can agree with the motion.
Okay, Councillor Lerner.
Yes, well, this is good. I think that we're providing some direction ahead of the next iteration of the budget here, especially since we're going to probably have a lot of future amendments and ideas. I can certainly support the first half of the motion, which I like the idea of capping the 21 hours and not increasing to 28. I don't necessarily see the ability for the district to afford that. The second part, I'm just a little concerned with the wording of as soon as possible. Or I believe that those were the words. I think that's fine. I will support the motion as is, but I just making the comment that I think before we transition directly to the RDN, it would be worthwhile for council to be involved in that discussion to determine exactly what the implications are to our bylaws and bylaw enforcement and all of that. So I will support the motion, but I think I just want to proceed carefully when it comes to the actual transition. But yes, I'll proceed. I will support this as is. Thank you.
Okay, Director Limshu, I noticed your hand is up. Is that meant
Thank
to be
you.
up?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I just want to note for council that certainly we should reach out to the RD if this is the path that council wishes to take. We certainly should reach out to the RDN to see whether or not there is even an interest on their part to provide that service once again to Lantzville, and certainly get an updated number as to what that cost would be.
Okay, thank you for that. I guess I'll speak to this next. So I've looked ahead to what the projected 2023 costs are for some of the electoral areas that are involved in or that subscribe essentially to the service through the RDN. And for instance, and they break it down to 3 sections. You have noise, you have nuisance property, and then you also have like hazardous, and they break it down to hazardous bylaws. So basically, the biggest one that or biggest component is the noise bylaw. And so, for instance, in Area C, which is Cedar, noise is for 2023, I believe, is $29,652. The unsightly premise bylaw would be $4,700 and $4, and then the hazardous materials is $3,914 for approximate total of about $39,000. If you go to Gabriola, bigger population in Lantzville, their projected cost for 2023, I believe, is in the neighborhood of 35,000. Area C, which is extension, so going up towards Westwood Lake and out towards Dumont and so forth, that's 31,000. Nanus, Area E is 41,000. Coombs, they actually opt out. They don't do bylaws. Not at all. But that's Coombs. Or Area F, Area G, or French Creek, San Imperial, and Columbia Beach and so forth. They're at about 39,000. So those totals don't include animal control, but obviously ours, it's blended in there. But when you take ours out, it's going to still be significant amounts. Almost 80 or almost 90,000, I think. So there's a substantial difference. The one thing, and I'm waiting to really, I'm going to reserve my comments more to when we get the detailed breakdown, because I have other concerns about what the actual true costs of having bylaw enforcement done in-house in Lantzville is, because there's nothing in there about legal. There's nothing in there about senior management time. These are all things that are significant, and even staff support time that goes into this. So I think there's other costs we have to look at that may blow the costs out, completely out of the water, which is presented in our financial plan. But I think we need to wait until we have more information, because again, if there's a bylaw file and it requires legal, that's above and beyond. I'm making an assumption here, but I'm pretty sure I'm correct. It is above and beyond what the contractor is basically charging based on the SOFI report. So Director Coates?
That's correct. The district would have that legal charge. But for clarity, the contract that we previously had with the Regional District of Nanaimo, it did not provide a minimum number of days or hours. And so there was many times where it was far less service. It also still sent the legal bill to the district. So if there was any legal costs as a result, it was still the district's.
In terms of, so it's important just to find out what the costs, true costs are, because again, there's senior management time. We have a direct manager involved, and the director in Limshoe, and then we have even just the head of our organization, our CAO, looking in supervising activities as well. So it's not just a one and done and contractor employee managing bylaw enforcement. There's other resources in play and within the district. So it's something we do have to seriously consider in trying to ascertain what the actual true cost is to actually have a bylaw in-house. Councillor Lerner, go ahead.
I was just going to propose one small amendment, which is that at the very end, the word when it talks about transitioning to the RDN, the words be added with council having final approval over the transition, or to authorize the transition. I just want to make sure that it comes back to council to make that decision when the time comes. Does that make sense?
Okay, so through to Director Coates.
I'm just thinking that you may want to, as soon as possible, that staff provide a report on the district transitioning, because there's many factors, not the least of which is we would need to approach the RDN. We also have bylaws now that at the time the RDN did this service back in 2019, it was all RDN bylaws they were enforcing. So I don't know how they'll feel about enforcing Lantzville bylaws. So, there's things like that. And even when the RDN did do it, it was still, came through the CAO at that time. And staff, would take the complaints and send them over. So there was still definitely a district staff component to it.
Thank you. So then in that case, my amendment would be instead of to transition as soon as possible, to provide a report as soon as possible about the cost being, whether the RDN wants to take this on and what the cost would be, so the council can make a decision. Thank you.
Okay, is there a seconder to the amendment? So second by Councillor Mundell, discussion on the amendment. Councillor Lerner?
Yeah, I just think that I want to make sure that council has all the information and that we can make a final decision based on whether or not the RDN wants to take this on and what the cost would be. In general, I'm very much in support of this. I just want to make sure that if the RDN says, no, we're not going to do this, or yes, we are, but it's going to cost $100,000 a year or something like that, that we know before we make that decision. That's all.
Okay, Councillor Mundell is the seconder.
Sorry, just,
Oh, you wanna clarify
I tried
the-
to get the amendment.
Sure.
Sorry.
But it's, and that as soon as possible, so inserting after as soon as possible, that staff provide a report on whether the RDN wishes to take on the service and the cost, and then it goes into, and then it goes into the district transition back to contracting.
Correct.
And so when staff are seeking this information, is council seeking the same level of service, like 21 hours a week, or are you seeking less service?
Based on the motion, I think we were capping it at 21.
So
But I mean,
we would need to specify to them.
that would,
21.
that would, yeah, I mean, the report I'm hoping would include all our options, but that the RDN is willing to offer. But if we can keep it at the same level of service, that would be preferable. So I would put in the motion the same level of service, yes.
Sorry, I'm not laughing at you.
No,
Councillor
that's
Lerner.
fine.
I'm just, in terms of the motion itself.
I know it's getting
curious to what
complicated.
it's coming back with, but I think there's also some information you would benefit from as well, because this is now a motion that's getting made on the fly and may not be well informed. So maybe Director Coates, you can read it back as with the suggested amendment.
That the motion on the floor be amended by adding, after the words as soon as possible, then in quotes, that is, staff provide a report on whether the Regional District of Nanaimo wishes to take on the service and the cost for the same level of service for the district to transition back to contracting to the regional district. So, sorry, the amendment ended at 4.
Yeah, I think that captures the
Yeah.
basic essence of what I'm looking for. Thank you.
Okay, do we have a seconder to that amendment? Okay, you're gonna keep say seconder, so discussion on the amendment. So go ahead, Councillor Lerner.
No, I don't think there's any additional discussion. For me, it's just basically I want to know what we're getting into. If the RDN says, yes, we will take this on and we can provide the same level of service, then I'm fully in support. I just want to get that information before instructing staff to make the transition, that's all. So I think this amendment puts us on the track of where we want to be, heads in the direction we want to go, but just provides us with that level of information before we pull the lever on the final decision.
Okay, Councillor Mundell.
Just a question through to staff. The contract that was recently signed will probably have to look into those elements as well to see if is there
Yeah,
a
the
time
cancellation opportunities.
Yeah.
And just, as you know, it is a contract for a service with a company. But also, as we know, we didn't get many responses when we issued the RFP originally. And so, there's always the risk that we might be left with nobody.
Fair enough. I can support this motion for all, for the similar reasons that Councillor Lerner is moving it forward. I would like to explore to see what services are available through the RDN.
Okay, additional speakers on this, Councillor Savage, and then I'll speak.
Yes, the reason I put as soon as possible is because the reason it's timely is the RDN, as I recall from a few years ago, we were told has cut-off dates for getting back on their services. So the sooner we inquire about that, the sooner we'll know those dates. And I'm hoping also that the report, which would just be the very basics of what's involved, can even be a verbal report, that we get that as soon as possible, because it would be a shame while we're waiting for that if we missed a major cutoff date and so on. So that's all. So otherwise, yeah, I like this idea. I assumed we'd be getting all this information before we made a decision, so thank you.
Yeah, Director Coates?
Just for clarity too, on the motion, sorry, it did specify by law enforcement services. Previously, we had two contracts with, well, more than two contracts with the municipality, or with the regional district. One contract was for animal control and one contract was for by law enforcement. Our staff to understand that when you say by law enforcement, you mean animal control and by law enforcement, or you just mean by law enforcement? I
So
mean, it
through
is the
to the-
same contractor that we're using, that the RDN used.
So through to the mover, Councillor Savage, what was your intent? Was it to be inclusive of both by law enforcement for unsightly properties, noise, and et cetera, or is it?
It's
and
to
animal
exactly
control?
what we had before, because I lived with that for decades, as did many other residents, and in my mind, they were all satisfied with it. So whatever we had before is the thing. And the other quick thing, please, is that
So just 2 seconds.
Yep.
So through Director Coates, and I believe the motion would be in relation to both general bylaws as well as animal control bylaw. And then through the seconder, Council, I think it was Councillor,
I think I seconded the original motion.
Yeah.
I think that's totally fine.
as long as everybody knows what we're dealing with, okay. But we are in an amendment at the moment. So as long as everybody understands that it's for both animal control and then general bylaw services, or not general, but for essentially noise, unsightly, hazardous waste, or hazardous waste, I believe. Okay, so Councillor Savage, did you have follow-up?
yes, with this amendment, please, it's been brought up a number of times, so hopefully the report could contain the costs, that, because I do recall there's some support staff involved in this as well, with perhaps increased time. I remember when we switched, this was brought up, so if we could find that out, because the idea is that that's another savings to go back to the time that was spent before we switched to in-house by law enforcement, so we can get those in-house staff savings, the support staff savings as well. Thank you.
I think we now need to go to a closed meeting at this
Yeah.
point, if you wish to discuss that.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. So,
We discussed all this as an open meeting, the support staff before, what would be needed. So anyway, I'll leave it at that.
yes, but it would be, I totally understand what Director Coates is stating, if we're talking about reducing any positions, and that needs to go to a close. Yeah, so I was just gonna speak to this, to the amendment. I think it's important to recognize that when we're talking about service levels, it doesn't necessarily mean hours. That's just how much time the person's available. Doesn't mean that, what does that actually mean? I guess that's what I struggle with, because you can have somebody in a position doing 100 hours and it's ineffective service, or you can have somebody who's in it for 10 hours and it's a highly effective service. It's very subjective, in terms of, I just don't understand how we can really get into saying, well, we're going to offer 21 hours in Lantzville. Are you going to give us 21 hours at the RDN? And the simple answer to that is they're going to say, no, you're not going to get 21 hours. We're subscribing to a service. Just like getting our garbage picked up or recycling picked up, we're subscribing to a service, and the more member municipalities and electoral areas that subscribe to any one service, the cheaper it becomes for all members. So strength in numbers. So I highly doubt we're going to get turned away from the RDN for going back and bringing the service back on, if that's the will of this council. In terms of the bylaw enforcement, it's not a apples to apples comparison because the bylaw enforcement department there it's a group, not just a singular person. And sure, they will consult out or check in with our municipality on various things, but it's a limited staff that does that. So there's a few moving parts there. So I'm not necessarily in full support of the amendment because I don't think we should be looking necessarily at service levels. Service levels is something that's evaluated by our municipality, our residents. And, I'm not going to get into what I hear from residents, but, I don't know what service level is better, the RDN or what we currently have, based on what I hear. So I think it's something that individuals have to evaluate, or members of this council, and reflecting on what they think is best in the best interest of the community, and what best value we're getting. So we'll see what information comes back. I'll probably have to get the motion read back again because I'm still not too sure. So maybe if you can read back the motion as amended.
The
one
motion
more
as
time,
amended?
please. Yeah. Thank
That
you.
the district's bylaw enforcement services not be increased from 21 hours per week to 28 hours per week, and further that, as soon as possible, staff provide a report on whether the Regional District of Nanaimo wishes to take on the service and the cost for the same level of service for the district to transition back to contracting to the Regional District of Nanaimo to provide bylaw enforcement services, including animal control, instead of providing these services in-house.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I won't be supporting an amendment. I'll just be simply supporting the original motion. We're not, it's one thing if the RDN was to come back and simply state, sorry, we don't have the capacity. They very well could do that, but they're a service provider. And essentially that's what we're asking is to be, added back in and have this as part of the service suite that we subscribe to. It's that simple. We're not going there and knocking on the door begging to come back. If they just simply don't have the capacity, they're going to say, sorry, we don't have the capacity. Or if they have to increase capacity, that becomes a board decision. That would be my understanding. So I think just stick with the original motion. And with that being said, I won't be supporting the amendment. Councillor Savage?
Yes, Mayor Swain's smarter than I am. I don't pick these things, but that's good observation. I don't understand the service level either now that you've brought it up, because in the old days, or not the old days, just a couple of years ago, we had our own RDN, and it would be different all the time. The amount of hours they spent was completely complaint-driven. You might get one complaint one month and a raft of them the next, so I don't understand this service level or how the RDN charge is. Just as Mayor Swain says, it's a service is a service. They provide what they provide. They may be slow one day, fast the next, a bunch of complaints one month, not so many the next. So I'd really would not want to open a Pandora's box there. It's just simply, as I said, as the service was before, where everyone was happy for decades before this came up. So to avoid that Pandora's box, I guess I won't be supporting the amendment either, but you can be assured, Director Lerner, that we'll be getting all this information before we make a final decision. So, and we can always change our mind at any time. So, yep, thank you.
If I may, I just had something else to add, just to help give more information. The RDN will be also going through its financial planning process here very shortly, so we'll be able to, or at least come back with, again, more accurate numbers of what the 2022 numbers are looking like, and what they're, again, forecasting for 2023 for the electoral areas that currently subscribe. The other thing is just using noise, the noise bylaw, for example. With each of the member municipalities, they have their own version of the new noise bylaw. So you can have subtle differences depending on what your community wants. It's not just one noise bylaw fits all. It's you can customize it to your area. The one thing, just you know, if there is a bylaw complaint that, you know, there's more legal costs associated with it and so forth, then that does get charged back, you know, to the municipality or to the electoral area. But, you know, the base rate, you know, that doesn't change, right? And really what we're looking at here is the base rate for bylaw enforcement services, and does that work for us or it doesn't work for us? And is it fiscally responsible or not fiscally responsible? Noting that you can have a problem file, and whether it's here or at the RDN, it's gonna cost you more. But it'll be the same, but the baseline cost is not the same. And that's the part that's most troubling to me. So, Councillor Lerner, go ahead.
Yes, the purpose of the amendment is because the original motion, correct me if I'm wrong, the original motion, as I understood it, issued the direction now to switch to the RDN as soon as possible, which is great, but I am worried we might get into something without knowing the full implications of or costs. So the purpose of requesting a report, even if it doesn't say the same level of service, but requesting a report to know the cost before we, you know, pull the lever on this, that to me is important before making any decision. So I'll support the amendment. I'm perfectly happy if the seconder is okay with it to remove the language saying same level of service. I just want to know what the cost is from the RDN before we commit to instructing staff to do that. That's all. Thank you.
I don't know if it's just simpler to vote the amendment down and then just make a new amendment, or through unanimous consent of council, we can just simply remove the wording that you just suggested.
Yeah, so that would be by unanimous consent, striking the words, the same level of service for.
Okay. So through to the council by unanimous consent, is there any objections? So any objection? You object, Councillor Savage?
Yes, I think it's simpler just to vote this amendment down and just state a very simple amendment, which is that this is a transition, and which includes information from staff. Simple as that. And they'll get back to us with all that information. Transition describes a process, it's not instant. So I would just remove the amendment, vote it down myself.
Okay, I'll be happy to withdraw my amendment if the seconder agrees.
Well, we'll just simply vote on it. That's easiest. It's just easier to defeat. And then essentially this doesn't, bypassing this motion doesn't just transition us to the RDN. There'll be a future decision of council to do that. So if that's the direction we go based on information provided. Okay, so I'll simply call the question on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment? Opposed? So that's unanimously defeated. So now we're back to the main motion.
Point of privilege, I guess. Can I have the original motion read out so I know where we're at?
Yeah, so.
That the
Director Coates.
district's bylaw enforcement services not be increased from 21 hours per week to 28 hours per week, and further that, as soon as possible, the district transitions back to contracting to the Regional District of Nanaimo to provide bylaw enforcement services instead of providing these services in-house.
Does that suffice? Okay, so any further comments from council? Okay, hearing, okay, Councilor Lerner?
Can I just seek clarification through your worship to staff? As part of that process, will council be getting a report as to whether or not the RDN is willing to do that and what the cost would be?
Yes, but you have indicated that as soon as possible, we would transition. So I would imagine, based on this, the contractor may provide notice. I don't know the ramifications. It sounds very definite, the way it's worded. And further, that as soon as possible, the district transitions back. So you're making a decision.
Okay, Councilor Savage, do you want to make it?
Yes, I'll make an amendment, please. To the end of this motion, we just simply add pending a verbal report from staff.
I think a written, if you wish, Councilor Savage, to change it to a written, I think that would probably be
All right.
more appropriate.
Pending a written report from staff. But
Councilor
again,
Lerner
I'll second that.
Seconding that, okay. All right.
and to speak to it, I just want to mentioned, I really want to minimize delays here in terms of timing with the regional district because Mayor Swain mentioned they're in their budget now, and there were these cutoff dates before, so it would be appreciated if we could get that information, even by email, would be great, so we know if there are timing issues. Thank you.
I have nothing to add.
Okay. All right, so I'll call the question on an amendment then. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. Back to the main motion as amended. Anything further? Okay, hearing nothing, I'll call the question. All those in favor and opposed, that's carried unanimously. Okay. Any further motions of council? Councillor Jones?
Yes, can I make a couple of comments before the motion, if that's
You
all
can
right?
Go ahead, yeah, if you have questions.
Sorry, just, are you going to close the meeting and discuss the labor issue? Or
For,
your previous motion?
if Councillor Savage, no, he doesn't indicate that he wishes to close the meeting. Okay. Councillor Jones?
Yeah, thank you. Just with respect to the fire hall, it just felt to me that we were leaving it a little bit like we were going to find the funds for $1 million, the 7 million projected costs being $1 million over the 6 million for the grant. The clarification on that, just my understanding is that if the grant's approved, it might not be for 6 million, so we should just keep that in mind. And secondly, I would hope that there are still negotiations going on to try to get that $7 million cost down, so that we're not looking necessarily at $1 million. And the second comment that I wanted to make was concerning the Parks Master Plan, the placeholder for $100,000. I respect that we may need to contract out some of this service, but I'd also like us to bear in mind that we have a community here that's passionate about their parks space, and we will have a Parks and Trail Committee up and running again sometime in the new year. And I think taking a good look at a Parks Master Plan might be a priority for them that they would embrace. So if we could just keep that in mind, because we might be able to get that cost down a lot. And finally, the motion that I would like to make is to, help me out with the wording of it, please, to strike the $25,000 budgeted for mapping eagle and heron's nests. Thank you.
Okay, so that's moved and seconded by Councillor Savage. Discussion on a motion, Councillor Jones?
Yes, I think all of us have lived around this long enough to know that eagles' nests are pretty hard to miss. They're always at the top of those lovely Douglas fir trees. And it'd be quite easy for the community to weigh in as to whether or not there are any in their neighborhood. And if you've ever lived near a heron's nest within a couple of 100 yards, you'll never forget the experience, especially when they have their babies. They're extraordinarily loud. So same thing. I think a simple note in the community update, if you have any eagle or heron's nests in your neighborhood, please let us know. That would save us 25 grand pretty quickly. Thank you.
Okay, and through to the seconder.
Yes, well, my idea is we point Councillor Lerner to do this, so he can get some good exercise. And so, yes, no, I agree. It's very simple. You simply report when you see it to get that knowledge. And again, the other reason is this would be part of a bigger picture, not just for heron and eagle's nest, but getting back to Councillor Jones, mention of this many times, this idea of having an inventory. So, getting an inventory of nature assets and so on. It would be part of that broader environmental, I guess, assessment of our community rather than just a one-off. So I'll certainly support that. And if we're looking at these special projects, I certainly agree with this one. I'm waiting till everyone has a chance to see the budget more, because I'll be mentioning all of these special projects maybe on the cutting block for myself, just for this, because this year is so special to get our taxes in order. So this is one of the first, maybe of more. So I'll certainly support it. Thank you.
Any additional speakers? I'll speak. Maybe I'll speak next. Yeah, I'm going to do that. With respect to this one, I'm not really in favor of eliminating this item. I don't know what the best solution is, but I think we probably do need to have a professional document and create some kind of parent document that captures all this data and centralizes it into one place. So it's one thing to say, yeah, and also to make sure things are professionally assessed, and what one person thinks might be an eagle tree may technically not be an eagle tree, and so I think it'd be again, this is coming out of project reserve funds, so the money's already there. I believe we like Director Harry indicated, we didn't spend for the $50,000 from last year, and we have $50,000 more going into it this year. I would suggest perhaps keeping that money available, and I don't know what the best. I don't know if staff has actually worked on a report or something to come back to council to indicate, how are we going to map this out? Are we just going to send a biologist out into the community and say, go and look up every tree? Or how are we going to actually take on this task? There are some areas in Lantzville that we know do have heron colonies, or may have had them. I mean, they might have flown the coop now. I don't know, and maybe never come back based on tree falling activities, right? So again, maybe through the staff, and maybe through this is to Director Limshu, do we have an idea on how this is going to be done? Can council expect a staff report on the strategy that's going to be applied? And
Your worship, through the council, typically we would, we'd go out with prepare an RFP for council's consideration, and then go out to see if there are interested parties in doing the work. Generally speaking, in my experience and in these kinds of exercises, it typically includes a sort of a tabletop exercise to see what's been cataloged. Certainly, there would certainly be a public participation component to draw on local knowledge. And then the last component would be for the consultant to do ground truthing to ensure that, the trees that have been identified are in fact eagle nesting trees, as opposed to perhaps a tree that eagles perch on, as an example. So those are sort of the main components of the exercise. We haven't, there isn't a formal, any formal documents prepared at this point in time.
And just as a follow-up, and maybe a dumb question, but I'll ask it anyways, do other communities actually document down perching trees? Because I just think of that as the forest canopy slowly, disappears, you're losing these perching trees, which eagles may, regularly frequent, and then all of a sudden they're gone. Poor eagles. Yeah, I'm just wondering, is that something that does also get mapped? Because I know that there's an eagle perching tree near my house, and I think it'd be a crying shame see that get just knocked down for the sake of we're going to cut down a tree. Because I think it's important, habitat. It's for eagles, even though it may be on private property or on a road right away or something. So what's your experience, Director Limshu? Is that something that can be included, or is it a bit of a long shot?
Typically, it's sort of anecdotal information, if you will, because the reliance is with the Ministry of Environment to enforce their regulations with respect to protection of I'll call it wildlife trees. So that would include nesting trees for eagles and so forth. That's generally been the approach that most municipalities take.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, like I call them hunting trees, right? So they got to sit somewhere where they look for rabbits and maybe fish and other things. So anyways, it's important to maintain some habitat for them. go ahead, Councillor Lerner, and then Councillor Jones.
Yes, I just had a question through to staff. When I look at this, it says that it was a council motion in 2021 and that it was to be considered in the 2022 financial planning process through the submission of a special request form. But now, of course, we're looking at the 2023 budget. So I'm wondering, was any of this already approved in 2022? Was it delayed until 2023? I'm just trying to understand how it came about into this budget.
Your worship, through the council, I'll take a stab at this. Yeah, as indicated in the report, it was a council motion back in 2021. The reason why it hasn't come before council or the project hasn't been initiated is just simply, staff were focused on other priorities as they work through the council motion list, if you will. And so, given that it's still a motion on the books, we've identified and brought it forward for consideration 2023. If council decides to change direction, it is at the will of council.
Okay, thank you. That answers the question. I appreciate it. I mean, in general, I think I agree with this motion, although I know very little about eagle nests and heron nests. A part of me wants to wait for the fully itemized budget before voting on this, but I'll keep an open mind and think on this as the discussion progresses. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Jones, and then Councillor Mandel.
Yes, just for clarity, I certainly have no objection to mapping eagle and heron nests. In fact, I think that's an excellent thing to do. What bothered me was the process of hiring somebody at $25,000 to come do it. So I keep the motion as stands and would suggest that we utilize our wonderful community to get a start on this and see what comes out of it. It may be that there aren't any heron or eagle's nests anymore in Lantzville. We'll see. But let's find that out. And then when it needs to be formalized, we can hopefully do so at a greater reduced expense than $25,000. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Mandel.
Yeah, I 100% agree. You read my mind, Councillor Lerner, as I was reading through and looking and remembering actually when this was brought before council in 2021, and had the same questions. If this was brought forth then, why wasn't this, as considering this is a one-time operating project, why wasn't this one-time operating project in 2022? So I'm 100% in favor of striking this.
And I just wanted to offer a brief comment. I think at the end of the day, we're going to be stuck with some kind of professional fees and actually making that final determination whether or not something is a nesting tree. We're going to be stuck with that cost. So I wouldn't want, it's fine. We can take this out of this year's budget or whatever, or we can actually add it back in as a special project during the year. We can fund that as well, but and make an amendment to the financial plan. But I do think it's probably one of these important things that we do need to look at. And there's probably different ways we can go about it. So, but I don't think there'll ever be any escaping of the professional fees, and maybe it won't be 25,000, but it probably won't be cheap. So to get this properly documented down by a professional biologist, so it actually has some weight. Director Coates, I see you signaling.
Yeah, I just added some things to the motion that was made so it would stand alone. So I've got that the 2023 financial plan be amended by striking the $25,000 funded from the operating project reserve to map eagle and heron nests from the one-time operating projects.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Councillor Savage, go ahead.
Yes, I highly want an environmental inventory done. I've wanted this for a long time, and the way I would do it, and this will come up in the priorities, and it ties very much into Councillor Jones' green infrastructure project, but you just simply do this over time, and a lot of other communities have done this. There's many sites that have sightings and this information already. So you get sightings, you enter them into your inventory, and if we're going to do this with a professional helping us, then you do it in a comprehensive way. What about storks? What about osprey? Ospreys are beautiful. They nest here as well. As Mayor Swain brought up, what about eagle trees, not just eagle nests? That's extremely important. What about other treasured birds? What about habitat for bears, cougars, beavers? All these things are important. And the history of this, it came up in the most haphazard, arbitrary way. It's because a friend of some of the councillors had an upsetting experience with a neighbor that was doing some tree cutting and apparently had either disturbed or affected somehow some heron nests. So it evolved from that. I prefer to take a bigger picture, more comprehensive view, do it properly so that we're also not leaving out other wildlife instead of just having these two. So that's what I'd like to do. Thank you.
You bring up some interesting points. I didn't think about the bears or cougars. Anyways,
Rats too, they're not
yeah. Okay, so I think we're good to, is there anything further on this? No, okay, so I'll move to calling the question then. All those in favor, opposed, noting Mayor Swain's opposed, carries. Anything further? So Councillor Mundell.
Yeah, a few more questions. Sorry, I know it's probably it's getting late, but I have a couple more questions. On my favorite 2 pages, mostly just because I find this very easy to digest, or well, to read and understand, page 24 and page 25. And this will be a question through to Chief Ruckus. On the equipment and information technology list, there's a budget basically going up from this year on information technology equipment replacement for 12,000 this year, going up to 14, 16, 18, 20 every year. Just wanting to clarify what this is for, and is this really needed, this increase in this technology equipment?
Actually, that would be a question for me rather than Chief Ruckus. So that's related to information technology, and it's an annual refresh on for an average of 3 to 4 workstations or monitors. So we don't replace everything in 1 year. We do it on an annual basis. So we've got 12,000 in 2023, 2024 to 2027 are just placeholders. Every year the financial plan is redone. So it's just taking into consideration that with inflation and essentially costs will go up slightly each year.
So again, just clarifying that this equipment requires
It's a replacement of, oh, sorry, go ahead.
a minimum of $12,000 to replace every year?
It is a provision. So it's based on the replacement of about 4 laptops. And then we do have monitors, we have keyboards, so it's basically all of our IT equipment pooled together. So that needs to be replaced on an ongoing basis. So as you are aware, every 3 to 4 years, your laptops become outdated. They can't support the new basically versions of software and whatnot. So it's based on a 4 to 5 year replacement life cycle for information technology.
Okay. Thank you for that explanation. My next question is on the same page in the linear infrastructure under the water. There are 3 years listed for water main replacements, but no information at all about where where those are located and how big of a project that might be, but there are certainly a large sum associated with each one of those. So that would be good to have a little more information on.
Your worship, through you to Councillor Mundell, I'm going to refer that question to Director Spears. We can add additional information on specifics. I believe they would have been included in the detailed request for those items. However, I will let Councillor Spears enlighten you if he can.
Through your worship. Yeah, I don't have the actual comments on these right in front of me, but I can actually supply them to you via email tomorrow morning, first thing.
Great, or
And-
as a part of the Director Hare's next document, that would
Yes,
be
they'll be in the more detailed document for sure.
great. That would be great. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor Savage.
Yeah, this is my last thing. I just bring this up for a consideration by both council and staff. I brought it up before, but these ideas are not definitive. They're just to open the conversation. But with this idea that we have a $432,700 shortfall with the asset management or capital reserve funding, as I call it, I really would like to wait on that before I say that's our definitive figure, because road standards are by far our biggest expense. I mean, replacing roads are by far our biggest expense. And in my mind, I view all these urban style of roads with curbs, sidewalks, and big pipes in the ground for drainage. I believe, which is to be looked into, that they would be more expensive to build than these rural standard roads where you don't have all the asphalt parking. You have a natural road shoulders, gravel with grass, whatever, and that the swales could accommodate a lot of the drainage instead of big piping with all this hardscape. And then the walkways would be well off the road, following the contour of the ground, so there wouldn't be that much grading and so on. So I'd like to look into that. I know we're looking at going to more of some nature ways of handling drainage, if that might not obviate the need of so much big piping and so on. So in other words, the jury's out for me as to, I want to define exactly what we're getting for our new infrastructure before I assign a price to it and a shortfall. And the other consideration is, I'm not saying I'm right, but it's just worthy of thinking about, what is the length of road is our target for every year? Is it 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers, 4.7 kilometers per year? Until I know that, what's our target? I really want to get that information before we get this definitive figure of exactly what our shortfall is. Now, the other side of this is that this shortfall is defined by taxes. We haven't been given a chance yet to look for other ways that might lessen this required amount for taxes. Hence, I don't necessarily support this exact figure for a shortfall. One example is with our amenity policy to increase our cash per unit from this paltry $3,000 to a higher figure. And we could use, that would again be a way we could put towards our infrastructure. So it does not all have to come from taxes. So these are questions I just bring up now. But what I'm hoping is we can spend the next year coming up with a new approach to all these things with road standards, with all infrastructure, before we come up with a definitive figure like this. And when we do, then what you do, you just take your estimated replacement cost, divide it by that many years, and you just pay it. But there has to be a transition because this hasn't been done for years here. So thank you.
Okay, any additional comments, motions of council before we adjourn? Okay. So noting, we will have obviously a future budget meeting, but at this point, unless there's anything further, I'm going to move on in the agenda. So Councillor Savage?
Sorry, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that for me, I made a commitment to the community. I just wanted to make this clear since this is our sort of big budget night, to reverse this trend of the big tax increases. And when you've got a 68% increase over the past 4 years, this 11.34 increase increases this increase of 68% as well. So in fact, this is to me a 19.05% increase is what we're really looking at compared to the reasonable tax amount of 2018, which for me was the last year before the big increases of last term. So I really want to keep that in mind. And for me, if I can't, at least freeze or reverse a 68% tax increase in the past 4 years, then there's something wrong with me, really. So I'm aiming for a 0% tax increase. I just want to make that clear. It's up to the rest of council to have whatever viewpoint they want. But for me, I heard so much of this hurt from residents in every manner of way, especially during the election when I was out yakking with people and so on, and this was high on their list. It's really hurting their lifestyle here, so thank you.
Any additional comments from council? And just on that note, the one thing that I'll try and do as well is just bring the additional pieces of our tax bill into the fold as well. So it might be, right now it's 11%, but when you factor in other parts of our tax bill, and you look at the, the average, that's something we need to be cognizant of as well. So, if the RDN portion, which is a significant portion of our taxes as well, if that's going up 12%, and then maybe this seems to be the historical low one is the school district, but if that only goes up say 5%, we have to look at the average and how that's impacting everybody's tax bills. It's again, I don't think everybody's wages are going up 10% every year. I know mine most certainly is not. And it's something we have to be mindful of as we balance the needs of the municipality out with what people are able and willing to pay. We can't trivialize, what it may mean on a daily basis or a monthly basis. At the end of the day, when we look at the costs of other things in our lives like food, heating, and in addition to our tax bills, we have to look at the big picture and I hate to be pricing people out of their homes. It may not seem like a large amount, but over the years it does steadily add up. And when you're looking at people on fixed incomes, it's something we have to seriously consider. There just isn't a bottomless pit of money in everybody's backyard, and I hear lots of discussions about financial decisions and such, and I'm very cognizant of it, but I don't think always everybody is. So I sure hope everybody sitting at this table is most certainly cognizant of the financial pressures people face these days, and we try to come up with a budget that best serves our community in multiple ways, right? So we try to maintain our municipal services to the best levels we can, but while balancing it off with, what people can truly afford. So I'll leave it on that note. So unless there's anything further, we'll move on in the agenda. Okay, so we'll go on to public clarifications. So persons recognized by the chair must first state their name and address and for the record. And an agenda item for which you're currently seeking attention, or clarification. And may speak once for up to 2 minutes to ask clarification questions. And I'll leave it at that. So just name and address for the record, make sure it turns red. There you go. And again, clarification questions, please.
Brian Blood, 7075 Gillette Road. May I ask a clarification question about the culvert under Ware Road that was discussed tonight?
You may. Is there a specific question regarding
Yes.
that culvert replacement? Okay.
Could you clarify what culvert replacement means? Does it mean the same dimensions of culvert at the same elevation, or does it mean a larger culvert at a lower elevation to meet the developer's needs? You see where that's going.
Okay, so Director Spears, keeping in mind, we're just providing clarification questions. I guess what are we're replacing the culvert? Is it just to today's standards? Is it to standards, looking at, preparing for that 100-year storm? Maybe if you could just speak to, what level of replacement we're looking at.
Yes, to your worship. Basically, what we'll be looking at is engineering what it takes to function as a culvert, and what it takes in looking at the environmental aspect of what's around it as well. Sometimes we actually replace a lot of these culverts in environmentally friendly areas with box culverts so that wildlife can move through without going on the roads and stuff like that. However, the biggest factor is going to be basically they're going to identify the catchment area. They're going to identify what amount of runoff will come off of that catchment area and size the culvert accordingly.
And I think it's probably fair to say if future development triggers a bigger need, then they would be responsible for replacing that culvert to meet the needs of that subdivision. Is that fair?
Yeah, that is correct. What we look at when we're doing design works is what the OCP shows us. So we look at that as maximum build out, and then we size accordingly, then upgrade to the 100-year storm rate. So.
Okay, thank you. Anything further from the gallery? No. All right, so we've made it through our agenda, so I declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you for everybody.